Yeah.
Hey everybody, and welcome to a live recording of the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast, the only podcast dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, and it's presented by us here at TrainerRoad. As you can see, if you're joining us on the live stream, this is where we answer your cycling and triathlon related questions, and you can submit them at trainerroad.com/podcast. We are actually just going to jump straight into the questions this week. I'm more of a summarizing, though, because we got a lot of questions, it's been increasing steadily, and it reached fever pitch this week on strength training.
It's that time of year.
Makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of folks are either in off season or starting up their season, or they've also been putting on Thanksgiving weight if they're here in the United States, holiday weight, that sort of stuff. So people want to use strength training. We've talked about strength training before. In fact, there's a video on YouTube of Chad showing off a few different strength training exercises that can be helpful.
YouTube.com/TrainerRoad.
That's it.
It's called like 5 strength training exercises for cyclists.
That's the one.
And we'll have it posted at forum.trainer.com.
Indeed.
In our episode notes.
Yeah. You can actually just go onto that URL that Nate just said, our forum. It's awesome. Lots of folks on there. But you can go on there and just search for this episode number, which is 190, and then you can find it really easily.
Cool.
But Chad, so we talked about this a number of different times, but let's just go into this thing. I know you have a lot of different things kind of on the list here. So
yeah, it's a topic we've hit so many times. We've covered we've covered so many aspects of it that I feel like we need to take a different tack this time and talk about really principles. But I don't want to just throw a bunch of principles at you and not leave you with anywhere to go with that. So then there's some specific suggestions. They're still veer general, but at least are actionable.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. Where do you want to start with this then?
First off, I like to make a couple things clear. One of the things, as endurance athletes, we always think strength training is going to fly in the face of what we're trying to accomplish. And if we're endurance athletes, there's really no room in our repertoire for strength training. And some of the benefits that come with strength training come at the detriment of endurance training. And to some extent, that's true. But for the most part, even high-level cyclists can benefit from some form of resistance training, whether it's plyometric training or really tempo-specific stuff, or a bit of cross-training in the off-season, body weight work, heavy work, whatever. There is room for improvement for any type of cyclist.
I want to say the people who are against it, and we'll talk about all these different points, but usually it's a study where people do squats for 6 to 10 reps, 3 sets, versus other cyclists who, and they both have the same amount of cycling volume, and they try to then see if that increased like your FTP.
Yeah, specifically cycling
very, very
specific.
Yeah. And I think there's a whole bunch more nuance to it than just that.
There's so much. All those studies fall short in some regard, and it's hard to compare them across studies. It's hard to say, the level of the cyclists they use, the rep ranges they threw at them, the duration of the actual study, the types of weights they were moving at what speeds, et cetera. There's often something to it that you can pick apart and say, this doesn't really hold water.
The other part too that people will always argue too is that if you do strength training, that is then going to take away from extra work you could do on the bike.
Potentially so. I mean, but this is reserved for those riders who are doing 25, 30 hours a week. Yeah, there's not a heck of a lot of room, although I'd argue exchanging some of that long, slow distance for some strength training would probably be more beneficial.
And you've got, let's do it. I'm going to lean back and drink my coffee now.
And then I also wanted to say that there's tons of benefits apart from being a better cyclist. Just be a better human. Just have a more capable body. Just be stronger.
You look better too.
Yeah, no, the aesthetics are.
Cyclists aren't known for their beautiful bodies, beautiful legs maybe, but not total bodies.
They are in many respects the
T-Rex doesn't look good on anybody.
Of what the finer sex wants many times. So, and something to add to this, I've seen. Actually, I can think of a specific cyclist right now. He's a young dad, and very much a cyclist build. Does not do a lot of functional training in any way. Threw his back out with his kids, right?
Yeah.
So
doing the simplest things.
Right, and then as a result, also his cycling suffers because his back
missed time on the bike, and power transfer goes down the tube.
Yeah. So it affects you across all aspects. Now there's certain sports where you may, and I know like we're talking about cycling here, but in any. There are certain sports where like soccer is a pretty dynamic thing. There are other things that are pretty dynamic and they kind of cover a round bit, but many sports build you in a single dimension.
You become a unidimensional athlete, really, and you're capable of one thing. You might be really good at that thing. It's arguable, could you be better if you integrated strength training? Maybe, maybe not. But the fact is, you're really only good at one thing.
Right. Exactly. And for cycling, so once again, we're saying this for cyclists, but don't just think that cyclists are like, the only ones that suffer from this sort of thing. Plenty of folks would benefit from
I'm going to try to learn how to ski.
Totally.
Those careful words, try to learn. But I'm so scared I'm going to tear an ACL.
Oh, yeah.
Because
totally.
I am so much in the forward, plane, and skiing's back and forth, and I'm very weak on the side to side. Something my knee should build up before I go up on the slopes and tear something.
Before you jump into this, a bit more self-deprecating stories here, but I jumped in and subbed on a soccer team. It was an indoor team, and it was like a 35-minute game, and I was almost entirely incapable of walking the next day. Like I was not. It was so hard because there's so much lateral movement. It was
we have no versatility as endurance athletes.
It's true. It's true.
I mean, even triathletes they're still endurance athletes. They're more versatile for sure. Than strict cyclists or strict runners, but they're still rather limited, especially if they don't integrate some form of strength training.
So I guess that's like the health side of things. But I guess the simplest question that you're kind of going at is, are you going for like growth or are you going versus strength?
Yeah.
Right?
So, and even if you take a step back from that specific question or that level of specificity, ask yourself every time you go to the gym, or ideally before you go to the gym, what do I want from this workout? Or in a more general sense, ask yourself, what do I want from strength training? Why am I investing this effort in going to the gym and doing whatever I'm about to do? If you're not clear on that, it's hard to hit the point when you don't know what the point is, right? So, I mean, we've, if anything, if you're a TrainerRoad subscriber, if you train with structure and power, then you've recognized the value in structuring your workouts and being progressive in nature and looking at your metrics and paying attention to the details. Why wouldn't you do that with your strength training?
That's a really good point. Yeah, you see a lot of people that are like, they go to the gym and it's like 15 minutes of cardio. Then I'll do some bench.
Started on what I see at the gym.
Yeah.
I want to help everybody I see. Everyone I see. I have something to tell them, and I gotta bite my tongue. Almost.
Don't
literally.
be that guy.
I won't be that guy.
Yeah.
We just triggered Chad on something that.
Every time I go, it baffles me.
But people don't know, you used to be a weight training coach.
Yeah,
right?
up until pretty recently, I probably had more experience as a strength coach than I did an endurance coach. But now my endurance experience outweighs my strength experience, and I'm still trying to stay fresh with the strength side of things too. Yeah. But if anything, for my own personal benefit, but also because I'd like to understand the interplay between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess
okay. So really, the simplest question I think that we have to ask ourselves as endurance athletes is why I'm going to the gym. Is it specifically for growth or for strength? I mean, and growth, I mean bulking. More muscle mass, not necessarily. And you'll get stronger for sure, but you won't see the same sort of strength gains if you pursue a different type of strength training. So growth versus strength. And I think as endurance athletes, we veer definitely towards the strength side. We want more strength. We don't want more mass to cart around on the bike or running. Swimming, maybe it's not as much of a concern. So it's important to understand that there are different types of hypertrophy, and hypertrophy is just the scientific word for muscle growth. Got it. Greater muscle size, muscle fiber size. And two types of hypertrophy are myofibrillar and sarcoplasmic. And it's not really important that you remember those terms so much as you remember one's more about strength and one's a little more about glamour. It's a little more about bigger muscles, a better aesthetic appearance.
Sarcoplasmic is the
sarcoplasmic. So like the the within the cell you get increases in volume that give you bigger, puffier muscles. Probably not the best word, but bigger looking muscles, not necessarily stronger in terms of the myofibrillar strength.
This is all about goals too, because I know there's some people out there who are like, no, I want some bigger biceps or bigger pecs.
Yeah, and why not? And there's nothing wrong with that either.
You gain 3 pounds of like solid muscle, and you look like way more jacked, especially as a cyclist with low body fat. So if you're like, I'm willing to give up 3 pounds to have a better looking physique, especially
lean athletes add a pound of muscle mass, and it's evident. And it looks good.
And when you add in the 3 pounds, like on the bike, like don't get me wrong, if you're chasing a national championship or something where you really have to split hairs, that's one thing. But otherwise, you might have a higher quality of life.
Yeah, it's all what your goals are. So
totally,
just want to make sure.
Yeah, and it's okay if one of your goals is to look better. That's fine.
Yeah,
nothing wrong with that at all.
I think all of us cyclists get that. We shave our legs, and let's be real.
I mean,
we know why we do.
We
that.
all have that, or else we'd all be wearing like sweatpants right now, and never wash our hair and
buy the biggest t-shirts and
just comfy stuff, right?
Yeah, Allbirds all day. Yeah. That's what we do.
Okay, so to look at it in simpler terms, you're going to the gym. You're asking yourself, am I going to lift heavy and short, low rep ranges, or am I going to lift less heavy and longer? Higher rep ranges, more concerned with the aesthetic end of things than the actual improvements in strength. Although you'll get strength improvements with both. But again, we're looking to just increase muscle recruitment. We want more active muscle fiber firing, driving the pedals on the bicycle. More active muscle fiber stabilizing our upper bodies. More active muscle fiber working in our arms to keep us stable on the handlebars, especially as mountain bikers or cross racers or that sort of thing. And then what's important to understand is it really correlates. Muscle size correlates with time under tension. So the more time you spend lifting weight, and it has to be weight of adequate, it has to be substantial. You can't go in and grab a weight that you can move 50 times and move it 20 times and call that a set. That's not doing anything for you. You got to find a weight that you can move 10 times and move it 7 or 8 times, 3 times over, sort of thing. So we're trying to accumulate time under tension. If size gains are what we're after, if strength gains are what we're after, we're kind of trying to minimize that time under tension and make each lift really meaningful. So lift a heavy weight 3, 4, 5 times, call it good. There's your set. How many sets you do, I don't even want to get into that. There's a lot of approaches that yield good returns.
Okay.
But basically, more time under tension correlates with greater muscle size.
And that could also be through frequency of the amount of sets you do. You go to 5 sets, or frequency in the week.
Yep. How many times you lift over the course of a week. How many sets you accumulate by week's end.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, do we want to go into the eccentric versus concentric?
Yeah,
stuff
just one thing. I just want to explain the two different
yeah.
types of muscle contractions, because you can, by targeting one over the other, avoid certain things and incur others. So an eccentric contraction is forceful lengthening. So your muscles, under resistance, but you're making it longer. So you're making a joint, you're opening a joint, for instance. So in the case of a biceps curl, it would be when you're lowering the weight from your shoulders down to your hips. The muscle is getting longer, but it's still under tension. Flip side of that is concentric shortening, where it's concentric movement, which is forceful shortening. So the muscle is getting shorter. You're curling that same bicep barbell or dumbbell from the hips up to the shoulder, making the joint angle smaller.
Got it. Okay. And then when you're bringing it down, that's the eccentric
Yeah.
stuff.
So if you do a pull up, the pull up is concentric. As you come back down, it's eccentric.
Got it.
Eccentric, depending on how you want to pronounce it.
Cool.
The gist here, what I want to get across is that eccentric contractions are the more damaging ones. And they're the ones that lead to greater levels of DOMS, or delayed onset muscle soreness. The soreness you get a day after, and especially the second day after. And there are plenty of ways to get DOMS. This just happens to be one of them, and it's easier. It's more likely that you get them through eccentric contractions than concentric.
I saw a joke the other day that said cyclists get DOMs one time a year, and it's when they think that they should go back to the gym.
That's so true.
That the next day after that, or the next week,
they're done.
Yep. No,
Yeah, exactly.
I've gotten it
true.
so bad. This was in maybe middle school. A friend's dad took me to the gym.
Yeah.
This happened, I think, twice in my life, where for 4 or 5 days I could not straighten my arms.
Oh yeah.
And if you get them on your calves,
severe.
I had to walk on my tiptoes. I could not go flat foot. And it was 4 days. So I have to walk around like this on my tiptoes.
That's a
and
high
I'm
level of
trying.
damage.
It was crazy. Because
It's a bummer.
I'd never done it before.
I've been there.
And
Oh,
this dad
man.
has got 4 13-year-old boys. And he's
Yeah.
just, go, go, go. And we're trying to go as hard as we can. And we
Right.
went hard.
Yeah.
Our bodies were not used to it.
That's how kids get after it.
I've
Yeah.
never heard of it with the legs. I've gotten it with the arms. CrossFit class.
The legs are the worst.
Yeah, CrossFit class and kipping pull-ups. The first time I'd ever done those.
Yeah.
And oh gosh,
That's a bunch of muscle trauma. That's a bunch of damage.
I was a
And
T-Rex
that's what I'm
for
talking
a
about.
week. I was just stuck. Could not move my arms. It was
Okay,
painful.
so another downside of these eccentric contractions is that it impairs glycogen synthesis. So it does have some impact on how quickly you can load the muscles. The damage in the fibers, it has some influence on how quickly you can replenish. And this could be a concern if you're a multi-sport athlete who's working out a couple times a day. If one of those workouts is a strength workout, then and you need reloaded glycogen for a hard workout the next morning, this might be a concern, something you might want to pay attention to. And so for that reason, I've seen certain athletes actually avoid eccentric contractions when they can. One of them in particular is working on improving his deadlift strength, and he would do what he called drop deads, in which case he'd just lift the deadlift weight up from the floor and then let it go.
Yeah.
It assumes you have bumper plates. It assumes you're in a gym that you can drop it, et cetera. But it totally avoids the eccentric contraction.
Yeah.
Planet Fitness, they have an alarm that goes off.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember you mentioning that. If somebody drops something like that.
Yeah, they actually what is it?
Or if somebody
it's like
grunts
the boof or something.
something.
Yeah, and they actually do an alarm. You go on YouTube and you
You can
boo.
see people
If
getting
you're in
alarmed.
a public gym or you're not the only one working out. You got to be a bit considerate of others.
The lunk alarm. It's called the lunk.
Lunk.
Yeah, do Planet Fitness lunk alarm. And if you drop weights or make too much noise, they send off an alarm because so people who don't know, it's like a chain, and it's supposed to be very open to the they don't want anything intimidating. Right. I don't think dropping weights.
Is the button kind of hidden from sight?
No,
you have to walk over and proudly hit that.
No, it's the staff does it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, and they'll kick you out if you if you do it too much.
If you abuse the
and that's good for them. But just to Chad's point, make sure you're in a place that this is a
have to be able to get away with it.
Yeah,
and it's a really limited
accepted culture.
Really limited in context too. I mean, you can't avoid too many eccentric contractions. I mean, you can't do a pull up and then I guess you could jump off the bar, but you can't do a bench press and then just let it flop back down onto your chest. I mean, there aren't too many exercises where you can avoid the eccentric portion of the contraction.
Right.
Well, sometimes people go 8 seconds up, 8 seconds down.
You
can minimize it.
Yeah, you can, but that extends that eccentric contraction and can really leave you with some sore muscles.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, but that would be a situation not to do it.
On different strength training programs that I've been prescribed before, that was actually recommended in the beginning as I picked things up.
It has its place. No, it's
start
the same.
doing that.
That's what I'm about to get to. This microtearing, this inflammation actually stimulates adaptation. So it is one method for incurring protein synthesis. So it's legit. I mean, it is usable. Just understand there are downsides to it.
Yeah, I should say I was suggested to do drop deads, for example, when I started out, just because they were like, we don't know where you're at with this.
Portion of the
so let's just first work on this portion of it and the concentric one. Then thereafter, with time, we'll start working it in where you're not doing it.
So if my goal was like bigger muscles, I could focus on eccentric and I wouldn't try to limit it.
Eccentric contractions, eccentric. I can't decide how I want to say it. And then greater rep ranges. So a high weight, but maybe you're moving 8, 12, 15, 16 times.
So what do you suggest then? If a cyclist goal is to be stronger but not gain a lot of mass, what kind of weight?
Well, see, it doesn't. Let me get to the strength training aspect of that, but you can get it in other ways too. I mean, there are slow force repeats, which is basically force endurance, learning how to turn out high levels of force over long periods of time, working around 75% VO2 max, which is roughly 90% of threshold, et cetera. I mean, there are ways you can do it on the bike. Long rides do it too. They deplete the fibers, they damage the fibers to some extent, and you get hypertrophy in the slow twitch fibers.
What about my mirror muscles?
I'm going to get to that.
Cool.
I also wanted to make a plug for sweet spot training, because sweet spot training hits the more shapeable type 2A fibers, which when you incur hypertrophy in those fibers, it's really quite usable, both in terms of endurance and in terms of more high intensity efforts.
It's more beneficial the more you look into it. That sweet spot stuff.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. It's a really good way to skin the same cat. And then I just want to touch on progression really quick. This is perhaps my biggest gripe when it comes to strength training.
Is it really?
I have literally.
We know a lot of gripes.
I have many. But this is probably my biggest one, because I can literally leave a gym for months, maybe even years. Maybe I decide to do CrossFit for a while, or I decide to lift at home, or I'm just doing body weight stuff, whatever. But I can leave a gym and come back literally 2 years later, see the same people doing the same exercises, the same routine with the same weight, and they have the same bodies. And I know for a fact they have never once asked themselves, what do I want from this workout? Right. What am I hoping to achieve with strength training? Yeah. So it has to be progressive. When you can do something well, you make it a little harder, and you learn how to do that well, and you make it a little harder. Same way we do with intervals on the bike.
Yeah, that's like someone who you leave your FTP at the same forever, and you do the same 3 workouts.
Then you're going to be the same athlete.
Unfortunately, common.
That could be a goal, though.
Sure.
Maybe it's just
reached a point you're happy with.
Yep. Yep. It doesn't hurt as much. Like once you get to it,
yes.
The hurting is the progressing through, breaking to that next level. That's why what Eddie Merckx. You don't go.
No,
doesn't hurt unless you. Greg LeMond, sorry.
Yeah. Reportedly, who knows?
Yeah.
Never gets easier. You just get faster.
Exactly. So that's that feeling of getting to that next level is always hard.
Yeah.
It's always hard.
And I do get that some people simply want to maintain the routine. They're not really concerned with getting stronger. They're not really concerned with changing their bodies. They just like going to the gym. They like doing their workout. They like how they feel after the workout. There are reasons outside of getting stronger. So, to those people, this maybe doesn't apply.
Yeah.
And then in terms of seasonality, we still periodize weight training. But I think one thing that we get wrong is I see too many people try to carry so much of their strength work into the season, into the actual competitive season, when at that point you don't need much. And we've touched on the fact that maintenance can be really minimal, and you can actually maintain what you built. But and I can't impress this point enough, you have to maintain all year. You don't achieve strength gains and then stop lifting and expect the strength gains to remain. They go away.
What do you do then? Just lift less?
Maintenance. I mean, once a week, and it can be a really simple routine. And I'll get to some specifics on what sort of exercises you can do without being too specific. But the fact is, you have to do something. Weekly basis seems to cover it really well. A lot of studies support this. You don't need to do a heck of a lot to stay on top of what you've already achieved.
Very similar to cycling.
Exactly, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
It's amazing. It's
Amazing.
the body. Yeah.
Okay, so because of this, I see most strength gains coming in either the preseason, maybe a transition period, or maybe before you really hit the training, and base season. But after that, any real gains, you have to dedicate most of your high intensity focus to riding the bike. And what strength gains you've gotten maybe through base season are basically held right there. You're not going to get any stronger, but you can hang on to that strength with that single weekly maintenance workout.
Makes sense to me. Yeah.
Okay, so and then everyone who argues, well, how is being a stronger athlete going to help me on the bike? And a few things spring to mind. One of them is that you get better power transfer, especially under heavy load. When you're really driving the pedals and your body's all over the place and there's all sorts of power loss through the kinetic chain, and not a lot of it, a high percentage of it is making it to the pedals, that's wasted energy.
Sprinting is huge. Pete
Sprinting
Morris just
especially.
said the noodle sprinter. We have a video of that on both our forum and on Facebook right now, and he describes, I think it was the very end of the podcast a few podcasts ago, but about how to sprint. And now some people are noodly.
Actually, they can see it on YouTube. It's its own video. It's just posted up there and on the blog and on the forum.
Right.
It's everywhere.
So it's everywhere. If you look at Sprinting Tips from a Pro with Team Cliff Bar Racing's Pete Morris.
Awesome.
And he talks very much about that very thing. It's true. And we've all sprinted with that person that's the noodly sprinter. It's terrifying for us. I hope it's terrifying for them, so then they can feel like they need to change it. But
it's wasteful, though.
Yes.
I mean, considering what they're after at that very moment, forward acceleration, they're wasting a lot.
That's just
of
a
that
good
energy.
example. If you want to be a better sprinter, and that is a limiter, is that you can't have the, what do you call it, circle of power? You're not strong enough to lock yourself out. That could also help with cycling.
Yeah, you freeze that upper body, you create that strong platform from the top this time, and then just drive those legs.
And I want to cover one thing that somebody pointed out. They were like, doesn't this contradict the fact that when we're riding, we should be reducing as much tension as possible to allow efficiency in terms of pedaling through the legs? And when you're talking about a sprint, it's different.
For sure. Apples and oranges.
Yep, exactly right. Now, if you're talking about just steady state power or whatever else, or you're just riding, yes, you want to be...
Yeah, you're not looking to have a rigid torso so much as a strong, stable one.
Exactly right. But when you sprint, we're talking about maintaining a tension all the way through, so then there's no loss of power when you're talking about really putting out those peak efforts.
Yep. So power transfer, big issue, especially under heavy load.
Yeah.
And that goes for hills too. Jamming it up a hill, pushing hard, heading up a hill. That's heavy load. I mean, when the watts creep up and you're working hard, it becomes especially important.
Yeah.
And then position maintenance. Just think about a time trial position. That is a specific position that if you're not strong in the torso, in the mid body, in the core, then you're going to pay for it. There will be power slip, especially as the event drags on.
We just did a 3-ish hour ride or something like that.
Yeah.
And we were jamming back on a flat, and we're doing a pace line. And I've been trying to lower my front end after that Specialized podcast because I showed Super Dave my position, and he was like, "Oh no,
You're so high."
Yeah, you're so high." Which I think I just look high too because I'm tall.
Because you're tall.
I'm 6'6". It's been a while since I've said it.
true.
New people don't know that I'm tall, and they don't hear it.
It's true.
198 centimeters. So, but I was to the point where when I was not in the front of the pace line, I was like either very tired or I would get out of the drops. And because my triceps were tired and my neck. I want to do a shout out. My neck's always been a problem. I've been getting better at it, and I was really good. Then I got sick, and I went off, and I came back, and it's all gone, right? But it should come back faster.
Sure.
But it's the craziest thing. You're gonna look. You know what I'm gonna talk about, right?
I think so. Yeah.
And Ian, you'll have to find this, but I think it's called Spud. But it's this thing you put over your head, and it's got a chain, and you hang a weight from it, and then you bend over and you go like this.
Sure.
But I found that's
cervical spine extension.
Yeah, and it's probably bad for you. But I mean, like, I wouldn't put a 45 on there and do it because you're gonna hurt your neck. But you just do that, and I found that's it, Ian. I found that it's really helped with both in TT position and for longer rides to keep my neck up. Just being a little bit stronger back there because it's hard to exercise that part of your neck.
I don't imagine you're pulling a 45-pound plate. You're doing probably some pretty small weights, right?
25 pounds, 30 pounds,
Okay.
Do it like 8 times.
Getting jacked over here.
Yeah, jacked neck.
I'm sure you're doing
I have a very
carefully.
pencil neck.
Be like neck guy on the internet.
No, I'm not. I have a very long, skinny neck, so that's probably a reason why. And my neck is so long. I feel like with levers, weight on the end, it's harder.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, it's not just TTs. Mountain biking, I almost probably died down Leadville, going down the big Columbine because I was so tired. I was sitting on my saddle.
Yeah.
I couldn't be in a correct hip hinge position descending.
Yep. And that's the next point, long events. So that kind of dovetails into it. But it's what I call, and I'm sure plenty of people call, postural endurance. Being able to hold your posture for a long period of time is way harder than you think until you've been out there for 4 or 5 hours and you're experiencing it.
It totally is. And this is where, if an event is like where it's very position dependent, like a triathlon time trial, a longer distance one, anything like that, or if it's in a technical discipline, this really makes a difference.
Totally.
Wait, gravel. Sorry.
This summer, when I was doing I wasn't training, but I was just doing a ton of laps at North Star on the enduro bike with a heavier full face helmet. At the first 4 or 5 rides, I was really going into the day asking what you want to get from this. I was like, yeah, I'm going to work on technique and everything else, but I really want my neck to be less fatigued by hour 4. You know what I mean? It was tough. So I ended up doing a good amount of exercises where I was trying to maintain a posture where I had to control where my head was.
Sure.
Ended up helping. But the thing is, if your posture starts to fall apart and the consequences are high, like on a road bike, you end up being less efficient. You end up getting more fatigued. Something like that.
Yeah, anytime you sacrifice your control or your form, efficiency suffers. You're doing more work for the same amount of forward
It's worse
motion.
on the mountain bike.
Way worse and dangerous.
Yeah, exactly right.
It's dangerous in both cases, but especially on a mountain bike.
Yeah, and you see that. I'm going to be racing the EWS North Star race this year. I'm super excited
Enduro
for
World
that.
Series.
Yeah, I'm super excited for that.
Right.
And that's going to be here. I'm racing that one. I know going into that I'm going to have to do and maintain strength training for quite some time and really kind of focus on that and almost redouble down for a bit because
downhillers, enduro racers.
Well, too, you're doing
so rough.
You're going after nationals for cross country this year, and I feel that even so in our pace line, I could be in the drops too.
Yeah.
But it's the amount of extra mental energy it takes because there's another thing that hurts on you.
Yes.
Like it's hard enough just to have your legs and your lungs hurt,
Yep.
but then when your neck hurts and your triceps
It
hurt,
distracts you a bit more.
and your upper back.
So you
you're
end up
getting
making
pulled
more
in
mistakes.
5 different directions.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's
The other
rough.
thing I want to say too is obviously road racing, being able to be in your drops saves you. Well, what do we? 40 watts.
Staying arrows
like
is
it
a
can
big deal.
when you're going fast.
Look
it can
over the
be
course
a
of
ton.
a 40K TT. I've mentioned this before, how they take photos of the riders on the way out, and they all look arrow and perfect. And on the way back, they look terrible. It's like you realize you're still racing the clock, right? Aerodynamics still matter.
Just road racers in general, though, it helps because it also gets you a better draft when you're in a group.
Yeah.
But gravel racing, you are by yourself so much in a gravel race that you don't think, and you're maybe going 16, 17 miles per hour. But if you're in the drops, we also learn from our Specialized podcast, you're still saving a ton of power and a ton of time. But those gravel races are usually longer. And what do people do? You see them; they're sitting up more, they're relaxed because they're tired, right?
It gets really difficult to maintain that aerodynamic
I hope people
position.
understand that there is a reason. If it's a limiter, if you say I've never been tired in any position on the bike,
Yeah,
You just haven't
and
done
strength
enough.
training.
Sure,
could be
it's
great.
possible, but chances are you just haven't done enough. Yeah.
And again, strength training takes many forms. It doesn't mean you have to go in and do bench press and squats. You can do a lot of things depending on what your goals are. So again,
Totally.
what am I after with this workout? What am I after with my strength training?
Yeah.
Okay, and then I'm just going to touch on this because we've covered it so many times, but in terms of scheduling concurrent training, so endurance training with strength training, the recommendation is still the same. Try to separate them as much as possible because there's overlap in the signaling that takes place at the cell level. Strength work tells your cells, I want this form of adaptation. Endurance work tells them, I want this form of adaptation. Which form manifests more than the other depends on the timing. So try not to overlap those signals if at all possible.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't probably do this right, but what I've been doing, I'm doing the bro stuff where I do just upper body because if I find that if I do deadlifts or squats, my legs are so cooked that it then impacts the next.
And we've covered this.
Workout.
You feel that you may be exceptional in that regard, in the sense that you may have more
Exceptional?
soreness. Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm sure if I did it for a long time,
Yeah.
it would be better.
Right.
But it's just, I don't know. There's only so much I can take.
Well, and that's it too. That's real. And that's why I say most of your strength gains are going to come in the preseason and early season. Past the point, you're doing so much work on the bike. Doing any real strength training outside of maintenance is going to be a really tall order and probably not productive.
I like that idea and I do notice my legs get bigger with lots of sweet spot work. Maybe that is more of my building my
Sweet
legs.
spot gets a lot of muscle fiber. I mean, that type 2A is that mid-twitch fiber, if you will, is super important when it comes to racing bikes.
Oh yeah, totally, absolutely is. And I guess I'm gonna throw in some contextual questions around scheduling really quick,
Cool.
just to run through that. Common question that we get: should I do my strength training on my rest day?
Yeah, I mean, you can, and sometimes you have to. Sometimes you're so fatigued on your whatever workouts you're doing, whether you're a triathlete or a roadie, mountain bike or whatever. You might be so tired that coupling it or doing it in the same day is just out of the question. So you have to do it on the recovery day, but you have to understand that what you do on that recovery day could impact what you've done and what you're going to do on the bike.
Got it.
So when possible, I like athletes to get it all done in the same day so they can reserve their recovery days solely for recovery.
That makes sense.
It's not
It's
always
good mentally
realistic.
too.
I think
It
so
is.
too.
It is for sure.
You don't have to go to another gym. We have a pretty sweet gym here.
We have an awesome.
But most people, you have to drive to a gym to do weight training, and that is another. It's just it just takes another 45 minutes or more for people, to get there and pack up and do
even
everything.
if it's just 10 minutes each way, that's 20 more minutes every day, and 20 minutes.
It adds up.
Well, then you change, then maybe you shower.
Oh
and
Yeah.
Another
an endeavor.
couple questions on this. Another common one we have is, which is better, strength training before my cycling workout or strength training after my cycling workout?
I've seen enough studies on the matter to only confuse me. So I'm not sure one is notably better than the other.
Yeah.
Sometimes they say if you do your strength training first, it's going to impact what you can do on the bike. And then some people say, well, if you do your strength training first, you come into the bike with a certain level of fatigue, which is very much what you're going to face if you're a triathlete, for instance, or if you're 2 hours into a 4-hour race, for instance. So it's not bad to train with fatigue sometimes. There are strong arguments on both sides of it.
Yeah, if I could throw in, geez, man, my voice is going away. If I can throw in a couple points on this, if you find yourself struggling or you're new to strength training and you're still figuring out technique, you might not want to reserve the strength training for after the bike because you might be more fatigued coming in and more likely to perhaps let yourself not have perfect technique.
And that's a solid argument in terms of prioritizing or in favor of prioritizing strength over endurance.
Right. And then if you're on the other side and you have let's say you have a very demanding bike workout later on that's a key workout for the week, it may not be a good idea to do strength training before then if that workout's still going to be so hard.
So
you
it's
might
not
be able to
a
complete it.
one size fits all recommendation. It's going to change based
That's
on.
a perfect, very good point. If it's a 60-minute aerobic ride,
Right.
maybe you do strength training first.
Whatever.
If it's these really incredibly hard anaerobic efforts, maybe you don't do strength training first.
Yep.
Yeah.
If it's a sprint workout and you need to be as fresh as possible, you definitely don't do your strength training first.
Yeah.
The way I try to think of it is that your strength training and your training on the bike should work together toward a common goal instead of you looking at both of them, canceling each other out and needing to fit it in.
Excellent point.
I always do strength training after working out because for my goals, it's cycling first.
Right.
And then the strength training is to supplement holes in my cycling.
And you're familiar enough with the lifts and the techniques and
I hope
everything
I am.
else. Because, if you are new, it's certainly worth consideration to place as much caution on that as possible because a simple, bad technique issue could really, cause it.
Yeah. So which brings us to the actionables.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's a
again,
good
I'm
question.
going to say what I do too, and this is probably wrong. This is somebody told me, very smart person actually, that you can have different levels of mTOR and AMPK. That's the cell signaling, where mTOR is for strength and AMPK is for endurance in different muscles. So,
totally.
So what I do is, since I'm not doing lower body stuff, I do my cycling workout, and immediately after, I've solved my saddle sore issues by not doing TT stuff.
Amazing.
Never
How
again.
that works,
Yeah, even in my, I go in my bibs and I put on just a shirt and walk one room over and go to our gym, and then I do, I think what you're going to talk about here, but I do low rep, maybe 2 sets, 3 exercises, try to get stronger, trying to go heavier and heavier and progress through, and then I'm done. So it's not enough to destroy me.
Yeah, you'd be surprised what you can accomplish with very little work. Very little work in terms of time. I mean, the intensity obviously has to be there, but you don't have to spend an hour in the gym. You can get away with 20 minutes. I mean, you can do a lot in 20 minutes.
And for one of them, dips, I think, I took a lot of time off strength training. I was doing 4 dips. And now I can do 8 dips, 2 sets with a 45 plate.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's just with that little bit. Do I need to get to 3 plates for dips? Probably not for cycling.
Right.
This is probably good, but if I just maintain that will help my triceps for both mountain biking and being in the drops.
Could increase that jersey size.
No, dude, you gotta be aero. Chad and I just swapped jerseys today. He gave me his mediums, and I'm giving him his largest because he has more muscles than me.
It's true. Yeah, true story.
Those are not fitting real well anymore. So
Actionables.
actionables.
Let's get into it.
So let's keep it still more towards fundamentals than specifics, but get in the habit of training movements, not muscles. Don't look at machines, or in fact, don't use machines at all. But they have their place.
Yeah.
The machines' place being getting you to actual exercises, not fake ones. But train movements. So think of a squatting movement, or a lifting movement, a pulling movement, a pushing movement, a split squat movement. Don't focus so much on I want my calves to be bigger, or I want my biceps to be bigger, or I'm going to really
compound movements you're talking about.
Compound multi-joint.
This isn't
our case,
bodybuilding.
heavy. This is not bodybuilding. No, we're not trying to build big muscles. We're trying to build strong ones.
Right.
So our aim is pretty specific. On that note of specificity, tempo specificity. So even the top level cyclists, and right now I'm thinking of Peter Sagan, Marcel Kittel. I mean, all these top level sprinters. They do a lot of strength training work, relatively speaking, but they're still endurance athletes. So they still recognize they have to be able to ride 200K before they get to sprint, or 150K, or whatever it is, before they get to sprint. So they're still very much endurance athletes, but they also recognize the benefit of being able to recruit a lot of muscle mass in the moments that matter the most. So they do, and I've seen evidence of this in recent history, where they do squats and they do them very tempo specific. I mean, we're talking about a weight that you can move really quickly, a weight that you could move 60, 70, 80 times a minute. And they're not doing 80 reps in a minute, but they're moving 4 or 5 times in a minute at that rate. So they'll sink down, explode up, sink down, explode up. So they're keeping it really specific.
Yeah. I guess that kind of makes sense, because one thing a lot of people, and this is a common concept that hopefully we can break in our minds, but we think that, if we go to the gym, well, first of all, just think of the reps that you do on a bicycle. There's a whole lot of reps, right? Your average cadence is around 95 reps
thousands and
per
thousands
minute,
of reps per hour.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're sitting at 95 reps per minute, I can't think of a single exercise you could do in the gym that would put you up to that point, right? Like, you're not
that would really do anything for you other than cultivate more endurance. I mean, it's not going to build strength.
It'd be pretty tough to bench press anything for 95 times in a minute, right?
Yeah, and if you could, again, endurance.
It would be seriously intense.
Yeah.
So it's like to your point, is there's specific goals with this because of the fact that you're building stuff, or strength for cycling specifically.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then on to, and we're just about to wrap this up if you're tired of this topic, some basic recommendations in terms of the actual movements. So I prefer single limb when possible for a number of reasons. And of course, I want to keep it movement specific. Okay. So we're looking for movements that we do on a bicycle. So particular movements that we want to make stronger. We're trying to reinforce neuromuscular patterning. These are the way I want my muscles to move. I just want them to move with a little more force.
Got it. So when you say single limb, you're talking about
unilateral. So instead of maybe a barbell row, maybe you do alternating dumbbell rows, which are a little more familiar, a little more similar to what happens, the contralateral movement that takes place when one foot's pressing down and the opposite arm is pulling upward.
Yeah.
So anything that kind of roughly simulates what we're after.
One of the exercises I believe that's even in that strength training video that you have is renegade rows, where you actually do that very thing.
Yeah.
With dumbbells in a push-up position.
That's kind of a catch-all exercise. It hits it checks a lot of boxes.
Yep. Yeah. It's a really helpful one.
But, and then as far as the movements themselves, anything you lift from the ground, whether it's a squat or a deadlift or a snatch or a clean or whatever, I just see that as postural reinforcement. The whole body gets strong. The whole body gets better at doing and maintaining its position, regardless of whether it's on a bike, whether you're standing upright, whether you're sitting at a desk, whatever. I see those as just beneficial to the entire body. So if you were to only do one thing, I like picking things up from the ground.
Yeah,
putting them wherever, where it's overhead, whether it's on my shoulders, whether it's just up to a standing position with a deadlift bar hanging at my hips, whatever.
Right.
And then pushing. In the case of pushing, both limbs at once has its place. We don't typically push much on a bicycle. So, and we do kind of row the handlebars if you think in terms of like mountain biking, for instance. So if you were to do bilateral exercises, I think pressing exercises make the most sense. And not too many people can do one-arm push-ups, and it's
not too many at all.
Yeah,
one arm,
like 5. No, there aren't many. I mean, and like I said, with polling, alternating contralateral movements, because that basically simulates what we do on the bike. And then handlebar specific hand-arm position. So I do hanging rows where you just hang under a bar and pull you get like a reverse plank or a plank position and you pull yourself up to a bar. Think about the position that, are you on a road bike holding your hands in a hammer position? Are you on a mountain bike with really wide bars holding your hands in an over grip position? Maybe do those so that your muscles are specifically learning and getting stronger at movements you will apply to your bike riding.
I saw somebody the other day, they had like a kettlebell and they had like welded a mountain bike handlebar onto the kettlebell.
Oh, cool.
And that was like their push-up thing, basically. So like it made it so and the thing that's interesting about, like, I really think the width thing, to get that without welding a handlebar onto your kettlebell.
There's a lot of ways around that.
Get two kettlebells, and that's one thing that I really like with a lot of these things is you can use those. You can change the position.
Kettlebells
so
are
it's
great
more like a
for
road
that.
position, more like a mountain.
Yeah.
And you can really
There's a
figure
certain
out
level
your
of
weight.
instability with those too. So
Yeah,
you can't be
great.
sloppy. You have to be balanced, which obviously on a bicycle we have to be balanced.
Yeah.
And then of course what everybody really wonders about is legs. And when it comes to lifting legs, during the time of season where you can get away with lifting heavy, or even during maintenance season where you maybe do it once a week, again, unilateral exercises. Yes, deadlifts are great. Squats are great. Full squats, front squats, overhead squats, they're all fantastic. But I like my athletes to have a particular type of specificity to it. And we're only using one leg at a time, whether we're running, whether we're riding. So it creates a balanced musculature. You can see, am I stronger on my left side than my right side? Markedly so is probably something I should address. Subtly so, probably not much of a concern. Safety. It's hard to hurt yourself when you're only working one leg at a time. You can only put so much weight on your body. So it's a little safer. Yeah. And then the coordination, balance, and stabilization that come with just using one leg. So, I mean, if you do like a Bulgarian split squat where you've got your back leg is up on a bench and your front leg is the only thing really supporting you.
Yep.
And you're coming up, I mean, you're doing single leg squats.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of balance and coordination that goes along with that. And a lot of that carries really well to riding a bike.
Yep.
Kind of go.
And I'm done.
Okay. I'm going to run what I do.
Okay.
And you can shake your head in disappointment.
And understand, this is a lot of this is scientific. I base a lot of my gripes on actual science, and I base a lot of my gripes on preference and personal philosophy.
Yeah. So it's a mix between trying to look a little bit less cyclist and to gain strength.
So strength that helps you on the bike.
Yep.
You're saying.
And I mix them up into push days and pull days. So, and I try to do just 3 sets. Sometimes I do a little more. Sometimes I'm in a rush. I do a little less. Push day, dumbbell bench press, 2 sets.
I like that.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And then I do dips, 2 sets, and I try to weight them. And all of these I try to go between 3 and 5, and then I progress in weight.
That actually reminds me of something I didn't talk about is when I was talking about training movements and not muscles, I'm a big advocate for body weight exercise before external loading. If you can't do it without any weight other than your body with proper form, you have no business weighting that exercise. Yeah. We're so concerned with lifting more weight that we lose sight of lifting it properly. So if you can't do it with no weight or maybe a stripped bar, then do not load that bar until you can do it just right.
And then the last one, which I've recently started doing, but I really like, is landmine press. And for that, people who, it's kind of a weird name, you take it's like a 45-pound bar, like what you do for your bench press. You either put it in the corner or there's like little sleeves you can put in, and then you put some plates on it. And then what I do is I don't use any attachment, but I just put my hands right on the bar and I push it overhead.
If you're watching the video, you can see Nate doing the movement right
So
now.
it's kind of like this, it gets in this circle and push there.
It's an arc.
Yeah, it's an arc. And I found that really helps work my my delts, my shoulders, where I've always had kind of problems
postural muscles
hitting those. And then 2, you can, at the end, maybe give a little bit of a push with my legs if I want to, and that works well. But the amount of strength, even just to bring that bar up, like your whole body's working, right, when you're doing this. And then I do 2 sets of that, and then I'm done.
You can make that even more compound, more multi-joint by adding a squat into that. Squat down,
for sure.
Stand up, and basically 100%. A thruster.
But I don't want to, again, these are right after my cycling workouts. My legs are cooked. I'll probably fall over. And then on the, I used to do deadlifts on my pull day, but I found that interferes with my cycling too much. So I start with pull-ups, and I've gone between, I'm better at pull-ups now, not as good as you, but I've done some weighted pull-ups. And then sometimes I'll do with bands, depending on, because I like to actually do more sets of pull-ups. I find I just want to get better at pull-ups. So I don't know why I do so many more sets.
Yeah, I mean, so I give Nate a lot of grief for his flat pull-down machine, and
just because we have one coming.
Yeah,
And it's mostly for rows that I want to do. But
you're taking the right direction, at least. You're working towards pull-ups. Too many people graduate or they never graduate past lat pull-downs. And I see lat pull-downs as only a mechanism to be able to learn how to do pull-ups.
Yeah.
If I don't care if you can pull 250 pounds down 20 times on a lat pull-down. If you can't do 5 pull-ups, you're missing the point.
I can do weighted pull-ups. And then also I switch hand position. So I'll be overhand sometimes. I'll go
I think it's good to vary
hands
that.
in, and then I'll do hands
totally.
together.
Keep your body guessing.
I'll do rack pulls. Rack pulls are you put like one hand on the rack of dumbbells, and you kind of bend over in a 45-degree angle, and then you row a dumbbell, much like you were sprinting. And it's very important in this
And the posture is really similar to a bike position.
You really want to lock your back out, and you want to pull through and use your rhomboids and your lats. There's this thing where you can do where you kind of like twist your body. You don't want to twist your body because it
has its
place.
Its benefits.
What I'm saying is you don't want to get it through this jerking motion.
Oh yeah, you're not doing it with your torso and
exactly.
trying
Yeah,
to do it with
you
your back.
can kind of like load it up and just kind of like spring it up
sure.
versus lift it.
Yeah.
And then the last one, I'll do some bicep like curls. Then maybe abs and the neck thing gets thrown in
Well,
there. But
in defense
gotta
of
do some bicep
things
curls,
like
right?
you say
get the
deadlifts
guns
wipe
going.
you out for the bicycle, but if you do it in the preseason, you do it in the base season, such that you carry enough strength into the maintenance time of year that you can do really heavy lifts, then you can do those 3 to 5, and I'd be willing to bet it won't have hardly any impact on your bike workouts.
Yeah. It's the progression part. I get in this. I get stuck in my head where I'm like, you have to progress, and I want to. My college lifting numbers, I want to hit them again. So I'm always loading it rather than maintenance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of doing, I always be like, oh, I can do another plate.
Yeah, when you get into maintenance, you've plateaued. You're going to stay there for the rest of the year. I mean, strength gains are no longer the focus.
It's hard to do.
I feel like you need to re-listen to what Chad said so far on the strength training, and then it'll help.
Okay, one question, Chad. Then we'll end.
Okay.
If my goal is to get stronger, can I get it on low volume, or do I have to go high volume?
Oh, with the lifting.
Yeah.
No, you'd be surprised what you can do in terms of strength gains. Again, it doesn't take a heck of a lot. And Nate actually pointed out a study that we found is brand new. 2019 is listed for the published date. But it's not exactly new information. It just shows you that you can accomplish as much on 1 set per workout versus 3 sets versus 5 sets in terms of strength gains. I mean, the hypertrophy, the muscle size changes with volume. It goes up, but the actual strength gains between those 3 volumes are basically the same.
Let's post that study, Ian. It's in the Advanced Fitness channel in Slack. So if you take the link to the study, the article, and put it in there. Basically, what it was is 2 groups of people. One people doing less volume and heavy weight, another group doing higher volume with that 8 to 10 rep range. And the higher volume got bigger muscles, but didn't get any stronger than the low rep.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And this too, as you get to be more advanced and you are a power lifter and you're elite, let's say you're I'm going to say like for cycling, a 4 or 5 watt per kilo.
Yeah.
These things change. But as all of us
We're
cyclists,
not dedicated strength practitioners.
yeah, we're not
Right.
there. So we can get a big benefit. And it changes as it gets. You have to add volume. You can't be like a power lifter and be like, oh, I lift 2 sets a week. Like that doesn't work out.
Right.
So I just want to make sure, I'm sure there's someone typing fierce.
Yeah, it's just like with riding. I mean, if 3 workouts a week have brought you to a certain level of fitness,
Right.
you're probably not going to go past that level of fitness until you change something.
Everything
about that.
ends at some time.
Yeah, it plateaus.
So that's if
We
you
did
have,
it.
yeah,
Okay.
that's good. If any of you have questions on strength training remaining from that, just go to trainerroad.com/podcast.
Just listen
You
again.
can submit them there. Sure, listen back through, and you can submit them through there, because I'm sure that's a thorough covering, but I'm sure that there are other questions you may have. So feel free to submit them, please. Chris's question, he says, I'm a big fan of the podcast and I listen to past episodes most every day on my commute to work. My question has to deal with what plans to choose for me to target my goals. I've just completed my first week of your Sweet Spot Base Mid-Volume 1 plan and have not yet nailed down my build and specialty phases. I know that I'm drawn to criterium, so I'm inclined to choose the short power build and criterium plans, which is a common approach that we see. Yeah. He says, following the completion of this Sweet Spot Base phase. He says, but to preface my question, this week I listened to one of your podcasts where a fellow wrote in and asked if he should go for a sustained power approach for criteriums or something similar to this. And to paraphrase what Coach Chad said, he says that you would most likely end up becoming a one-trick pony with this approach, where you're limited on the different capabilities you have. So here are my questions. Number 1, can you list off some of the diverse capabilities that successful crit racers have? And then number 2, what build and specialty plans check most of the boxes to make me the most diverse, well-rounded crit racer I can be? Is it the short power build and crit plan, or something like the general build and rolling road race plan? He says, thanks, keep up the great work, and hashtag beat Pete. We already beat him, man. It's already done.
We did it.
Yeah,
Check.
it's done.
Sort of.
No, we did.
Yeah, we
Based
did.
on the rules, we did.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I don't think we're going to beat Pete very much this year. Okay, so looking at this one, can you list off some of the diverse capabilities that successful crit racers have?
Yeah.
This is a super interesting topic.
Yeah. So obviously you have to have big neuromuscular strength or power. You need to be able to jump quickly. You have to cover things. You have to initiate things. You have to sprint. You don't have to sprint, but if you want to do well, you're going to have to sprint.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have to have good endurance. The events are at least 40 minutes, right? Or maybe
30 minutes
maybe
for
30 minutes.
For
Cat
lower
5.
categories.
But still, you got to have a reasonably big engine to ride hard for 30 minutes.
Up to an hour.
You got to be able to change
Up to 90
tempo.
minutes, yeah.
So you have to be able to load the muscles up, clear the muscles. So you got to have a big aerobic motor to clear the lactate. You got to have a big anaerobic motor to generate the lactate. You pretty much got to have it all. I mean, criterium racing incorporates a little bit of everything. And then if you're going to be a breakaway type of crit racer, you got to have big muscle endurance.
Yep.
On top of it.
That's the interesting thing about a criterium racer is I feel like you can be faced with any sort of requirement for a fitness profile or something like that at any point in a criterium. Whereas, I guess, sure, you might be able to argue that in a not competitive a time trial field or something like that, you could have poor pacing. But in that one, it's kind of like there's this clear path in terms of how to be successful, usually.
This is for diverse. You can be a one-trick pony where all you do is sprint, or all you do is when the pack slows down, you do a 40-minute solo.
Yeah.
And there are some guys who are strong enough to pull that off every single time. It's ridiculous. So you can, especially if you recognize that as one of your strengths, fully pursue that route. Yeah.
And it could be the fact that where we usually race is the Northern California, Northern Nevada region, but Northern California, it's an extremely competitive region in terms of road cycling. So
highly competitive.
There's a big depth of experience as well as a lot of fitness. Mm-hmm. So there are certain regions where there's a lot of fitness, but not quite as much experience, or a ton of experience, but maybe not as much fitness. But what you get is, in this case, you can have the same course and you can race it 15 times, and 15 times it will end up shaking out differently. Like the demands of the event will be different, even though it's the same course. And that's what's so interesting about criteriums is that usually the courses are kind of simple, at least it's short laps. So it's not like, anything that's changing or has a huge unique part in it. So really, it kind of neutralizes the course in some respects, and it's just however everybody else wants to play their cards, all the racers do, that's how it ends up going.
Game of chess. It's always different.
Yeah. Same board.
That's one of the many aspects of it that makes it so fun.
Yep.
Yeah, so I feel that, last year was the first time that I've actually focused on sustained work, even though it was very minimal amount of time to be able to do that, but still sustained work. And I feel so much more comfortable going into the thought process going into criteriums now, because I feel like I have another ace in my pocket.
I think in this case, the build is pretty flexible. I mean, sweet spot base is where I'd pretty much send anybody.
Yeah.
And then I'll just jump right to specialty and say crit plan. There's every other. I mean, it's specifically dedicated to making you a good crit rider, and that's part of the reason why the build is a bit flexible, because you can focus on maybe you're not really good at sustained power, so you choose a sustained power build and you improve that. And then you come into the crit plan, you have 8 weeks to hone your criterium specific fitness.
Yes.
So the build is the most flexible of the 3 phases there.
I feel like the build is more of like the less specific fitness, and it covers more bases in some respects. And then the specialty phase. So for me, for example, what I would do if I was prepping for a season of crit racing is I would do general and maybe even sustained, or I might mix in some sustained workouts into something like that, and then go and sharpen things up with the shorter, harder stuff. Because I know for me that I react very quickly to that sort of training, the shorter, harder, repetitive stuff. So I'd rather kind of shore up some other sides of things before I go into that.
I think it's a good thing of you think about what are my weaknesses versus my strengths. And if I'm getting dropped from surges, well, maybe I'll do general build or short power build. Yeah. But if I'm not...
Oh, surges. Sorry. Yep.
And then if I'm not, and I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna win a breakaway. I'm gonna do sustained power build. If I say I'm gonna win in a sprint at the end, or this is really surgy crits that have like little hills, I'm gonna do short power build. Or if I want to be more of this all around person where I'm gonna have a really high chance to win any race, general build. Yeah. Right. Like I want to be flexible, because a lot of times the race doesn't play out how you want it, so
Yep.
you don't have a chance.
You have to be adaptive.
Yeah, to
and
use it.
capable in a lot of ways.
And then so that's how I would pick it.
I feel like it's like the best way to increase like your win percentage in a lot of ways in criterium racing is by making sure that you're not just a one-trick pony, basically. Like
And many arrows in the quiver. I mean, you become a more or a less predictable rider. People don't know what you're
Yeah,
going to do. I mean, if you are a one-trick pony, it's really easy to anticipate what that guy's going to do. You race with the same group a few times, and you are that one trick.
the group will mark you.
Or they won't. They'll just know that,
Right.
he's going to take off and ride solo for 40 minutes, so we just have to get it together for 20 minutes to bring it back. He'll be tired, and we'll roll by.
Yeah, it's kind of a situation where there are racers locally here that are able to pull out any number of different options to win a race. And what you end up doing is you end up working so hard to cover a lot of their moves or to try to put them out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, when they're a threat on a lot of levels, they're
hard.
They're a big concern,
Yeah.
a going concern throughout the entirety of the race.
So this year for me is focused on road stuff, and my wife, because there's a lot of Northern California races, but they all take 10 hours or 8 hours in the weekend to drive
It's
there
it's
and
a
back.
weekend because 3 to 5 hours of driving.
So I asked my boss at home if I could go, and she said, "You can do those as
CEO's
long
boss.
as you don't do that stupid Leadville thing." So
It's one or the other.
yeah, exactly.
Nice.
So I was like, okay, I
There
won't
you
do
go.
the stupid Leadville thing, and I'll do
Yeah.
these road races. But for me, I want to ask you a question, Chad, of what I should do. So I was talking with Pete here, and I love to talk tactics with Pete. I don't have a very great sprint. I can put out a lot of power in the saddle. So first question is there ever a reason to, I'm going to use sprint or maybe a long sprint in the saddle without being out of the saddle?
Yeah, for sure.
Totally.
I mean, you don't have to stand to sprint. I mean, that's in the classic sense, that's a sprint, but you can sprint seated, and a lot of riders can generate a ton of power. I mean, it's not going to be like an explosive 8-second sprint from the saddle,
It's not
but
a
it could be
yeah.
a really powerful 20, 30, 40-second sprint
Yeah.
from the saddle. And
This-
I like them simply because it's a great way to sneak away from a group, whether it's a sprint, a preem sprint or a finish sprint. Staying seated and powering away on the outside of a turn, it doesn't raise the hackles like an out of the saddle, all limbs body flailing, really aggressive attack.
What Pete says,
It's stealthy.
He always talks about those seconds of reaction from the group, and he goes, if you can get 3 seconds where they look at each other,
Yep.
that is the difference, especially on the end in the last lap,
Oh, yeah.
versus the instant response. I think to your point is, if you're out of the saddle sprinting super hard,
It's like, come get me.
I'm gonna go.
yeah,
come get
it's,
me.
it's like the rabbit with the dogs, right? They just can't
Yeah.
help it.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
when you're kind of down, and especially if you can make it look pretty fluid, then it might be a couple seconds because it doesn't seem like it's going as fast.
Seriously. And when that 2 or 3 second gap opens up and it's 1 or 2 laps to go and people are preserving themselves for that sprint, they are so much less likely to want to do that much work and then hope they still have something left for a sprint. So
Yes.
it can, that 2 or 3 seconds can grow into 4 or 5 or 6 seconds before you know it. You've got enough gap. All you have to do is stay on the gas
Yeah.
and it's yours.
I want to clarify something on this too. This isn't a field sprint technique. This isn't a coming across the line
No,
technique.
this is
When you're sprinting
1 to
across the
2 to
line,
go.
that's when you're out of the saddle. And if you don't know how to sprint out of the saddle, I see a lot of people like in lower categories, like they'll cross the finish line and they were in the saddle the whole time and kind of going against, a field sprint. It's fine if you don't feel comfortable doing it for sure, but it's something that I would definitely encourage you as a crit racer
to learn.
learn that.
Oh, yeah.
But we're not talking about staying seated and sprinting against a bunch of guys that are out of the saddle putting out
This
max
is a
torque.
different type of sprint. In fact, let's just put it in quotes. It's a
Yeah.
sprint.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a long
right.
sprint. Let's just call it a long sprint.
And this is like where, so I regularly, because I have a really, really effective snap out of the saddle, I can accelerate very quickly for a short period of time like that. And I'll use that many times because it doesn't feel particularly draining to me. And I'm able to, boom, snap up onto somebody's wheel very effectively and then, ride their wheel in a break. But I always end up signaling folks, right? Always with that sort of thing. So that's something that I think, even though you may feel like it's very effective to get you to where you need to be, hopefully you can train a different side of things so that you can still not throw up those alarm bells. Because honestly, many times in a crit race, you will not be the fastest person or in a crit, and you will still win because you were just the one that made the right move at the right time, or somebody else didn't make the right move at the right time.
The other thing about being seated is you give off less of a draft. especially, and you are more aero. So maybe I'm putting, I start with 1,000 watts seated, which I can do. And that's not going to be obviously as much as an out of the saddle sprint, but my frontal area is so much lower.
Totally.
But so let's go back to that thing where it's maybe last lap or something, and I get a 3-second gap. Well, if I'm up and I'm standing and someone tries to bridge up, they have a much bigger wake behind me to get.
Yeah,
totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And what we know too from the all the wind tunnel stuff, and cyclists should know this. So if I'm traveling, let's say 35 miles per hour, but I have a good 3-4 second gap, the riders that have to come into my draft don't go 34. They go even harder.
They have to go harder.
Right? They go 36, 37. And to get into that draft, because wind resistance goes up exponentially as you're going faster, they have to go even harder.
Yes.
So that's why having that little gap can really help. And if I have a less of a wake, it will take them longer to get into my draft.
And that's why you really want to, like when you're chasing on, you don't start to ease up when you get close. That's why you go until you latch onto that wheel.
Because then it really drops off.
Yeah, that's
Because
a
you're
mistake
spending-
you only have to make once or twice.
Yep. Yeah, and I know it's tempting because you feel so tired and it's hard.
And
But
you feel like you're close enough, but you're just not. It's
Close that
such a
distance, or
downer.
else it's you're spending so much time, or you're spending more time working harder. That's basically the way to look at it.
So people are going to race against me. Don't just pretend I didn't say this. Okay.
You've got a
Disregard.
question, right?
One of my best moves that I've done before is 45 seconds to 1 minute left in the whole race. I go as hard as I can.
You've got really good capabilities.
Anaerobic capacity, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think I can do, just recently in a workout inside, at the end of an interval thing, I did 600 for a minute. I think I can get that probably to 700 or more, and that's with a good, I could go to 1,000 and then kind of die down to get that break. So my strategy is, especially with 45 seconds left, the sprinter people, they look at each other, because to pull that back, especially if I can come from the back, and we have another crit video on YouTube where Pete Morris does this really well. If you can come, really it's an attack from the back, so you come in
5-6 riders back, maybe.
Yep. And you can get speed before there's a reaction.
Yeah, you could actually start farther back in the field from that.
Yeah,
Totally.
Pete does,
Yeah.
and it's really too. You kind of got to figure out. So this corner, everyone slows down, and if I take this wider line, I don't get a draft, but I can get more speed.
Yeah, our local crit course has a corner that is just perfectly set for this sort of tactic.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is, if I can get that, and at the end, that's when, especially in the lower categories, people look at each other. When you have a team, it's different, because a team, 2 people can kill themselves or destroy themselves to catch back up, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
The lower categories, they say, you get that, because I want to sprint.
Yeah, exactly.
If I bridge everyone up to you, I automatically am going to get 20th place.
Yeah, totally.
So if that is my tactic, Chad, what kind of workout should I do to perfect that 45 to minute power, all out power? Not repeatable, just all out.
45 to 60-second repeats at all-out power. Come into the workout rested, go as hard as you can for each of the repeats, and recover fully in between them.
Yeah,
and
that's a big part, right?
For a 1 minute effort, that's everything in the case of these. Otherwise, you turn it into more of an aerobic sort of benefit, and you're not growing that anaerobic capacity, which is what you're targeting right here. So in the case of a minute repeat, you'd probably recover anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes in between repeats. I'm talking full recovery, noodling the whole time. By the time you're ready to go again, you're breathing through your nose, you're bored with recovery, and you hit it hard again. And then you turn the workout off when you're not reaching those, within whatever percentage. I'm not going to put a hard number on it, but when you notice you're kind of your power's fading a bit, and what were 700 watt or 600 watt minutes have dropped to 550 or 530. It's time to call it a day.
Should each one be all out, or do I want to be at 95% so I can do more of them?
It's a question of the workout. I mean, you can get benefit from both. So you could do 2 or 3 extremely hard efforts, and that is a solid workout. A sprint workout, basically 3 30-second wind gates, or 60 seconds in this case, that's a sufficient workout. It's for a lot of people, that will be a sufficient stimulus. For more experienced racers, maybe you need to accumulate more time, which means backing it off 5 or 10% and doing an extra 5 or 6 sprints. So
Cool.
Now I know the card you're going to play.
Well, I could do a breakaway too.
It's true.
Well, and even if, so you do that approach, you get a 2 or 3 second gap. That already is discouraging. But someone gets up to you and you're still drilling it. So that's 15 seconds into what you're going to do for a minute. And they have to hang in there for another 10 seconds, another 10, another 10. At some point, a lot of those riders come unglued. They're like, nope, this is not happening.
What I want to do is, and you can get to the point where even if they know your strategy, they can't beat it.
You're
You know what I mean?
stronger. You're still
Exactly.
stronger. Yeah.
So it's like hill climbing in the tour. Like, oh, he's going to attack on this hill.
There are few
Everyone
things
does
as
that.
satisfying as riding someone off your wheel. Being in front and riding away from somebody. That's there's no bigger ego boost.
What I don't want though is in that last lap, someone ride on my wheel, and I just bring them up the whole way, and they're doing 400 watts per minute, which
the
is
right
very
guys will
doable.
do it too.
I know.
yeah.
So don't do that. At
should
least
have-
let me
Nate,
win,
you-
people.
Nate, you should have said like I want to go for a long bomb or like the final sprint finish. You just said.
Oh yeah,
something
I'm going
like
to
that.
sprint behind someone in the last 100
Yeah.
meters.
Yeah, exactly. That's your tactic.
No, I do want to try. I'll do different tactics, but
course.
that's one where I think I just talk about strengths and weaknesses. If that's a strength, I want to train that strength
Yeah.
and have it be another.
Why not?
It depends to the course. Like
for
some
sure.
courses, they're just so packed, jammed. Like I can't do that strategy.
Well, big
Right.
fields, yeah. I mean, you'll spend half or more of the race just positioning yourself for a move like that. It
Yeah.
can be pretty tough, but with our local course, you can make that work just about any time.
Totally. While we're talking race tactics, really quick, a couple clarifications from last week that
Oh,
I
yeah.
want to throw in. We talked about attacking into a headwind actually being a good strategy, and in many cases it is, right?
Can be, yeah.
We thought about some edge cases.
Yeah,
where-
we said never do a tailwind, but it's not never. Of course, it's not never.
There's no never.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's never a never.
Don't listen
in
to us.
cycling. But we were thinking about when you introduce a climb into things, and if you think about attacking on a climb with wind, a slight tailwind can actually be good in that scenario.
Yeah.
Just because it lessens the impact of aero drag and then it emphasizes the watt kg. So if you find yourself in a favorable position with watt kg, then that can be nice.
Yeah. So
right?
the difference is too the amount of how far you get away in an attack is you don't get away as fast on a hill climb. So if there is a headwind, it's harder.
Perhaps not. Yeah.
If there is, well, I mean,
Well, I'm saying that
if you're on an 8% grade versus a flat road, after 2 seconds, you're going to be farther ahead on the flat road. You should be.
it depends.
And
Yeah.
Depends. I guess it does depend.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
But so if you're going into a headwind, you're going to have more of a wake that is more likely to hit that person behind you if you're on a climb, creating a smaller gap. I know I've seen things where in the tour where there is a headwind and they have people sacrificing themselves, nobody attacks.
Yeah.
But if there's a little bit of a tailwind, then it gets really exciting because
climb, yeah,
on
yeah.
a climb because people attack each other because you don't get the benefit of getting in somebody's draft on that climb.
I think it psychologically affects people too.
Yeah, for
when
sure.
You feel that tailwind and you're climbing a little faster than you thought you were.
Yeah, you
so
feel
you're like, what?
Superman.
All right, good. I can throw something out here and see how it works.
Yeah, Superman.
So it's versus a headwind. It's making you climb slower than you were. And headwinds are just they even said psychologically speaking. Gosh, I don't know if this is a study or not. So who knows? It could be totally wrong. But I remember somebody referencing that, and they were talking about mountaineering and the fact that with wind beating on you nonstop, that there's actual psychological effects with that.
The other thing, if I'm in a breakaway and I have, let's say, 3 or 4 riders with me, and I want to make them tired, when I'm in the front and there's a tailwind, I'm pushing extra because it's almost like a crosswind because they're not going to get as good a draft, and I want them to push more watts too.
Yes.
And I know Chris, you said it's not likely to have the wind that's going the same speed. In Reno, it is extremely likely. It's almost like every day there's a 30-mile-per-hour wind, or at least
Seems
once
like
a
it.
week. Yeah, in our Tuesday night crits.
Every
it's-
Tuesday is the windiest day. It seems.
I know, like 35-mile-per-hour crosswind or tailwind, depending on the day. So
Seems like it.
it's a tactic that can happen depending where you live.
For sure. Before we get into Mark's question, I just want to thank everybody really quick on the reviews for the podcast.
That's right.
We had some reviews. We can do better. We could get more reviews. It would be awesome. 5-star reviews. And if they're not 5-star, let us know what we can do to be better, and we'll try to do that. But we're ahead of Lance.
By how many votes? It was like 7.
It was pretty slim, but we're ahead of him for a bit. So yes, please keep that up. You can do that on iTunes, and if you don't even listen on iTunes, it doesn't. I've seen a lot of people say, "Well, I don't use iTunes." You can still even review it online, but
Yeah. You go in the
If you
App Store
feel
too. Gives
yeah.
a little review.
for sure, if you feel we earn it. If not, don't worry about it. So Mark, he says, I race vet masters road races. Hold on, I'm going to pause right here. We need to talk about something that you guys are going to do, possibly, since we're talking about masters.
Oh, I'm going to pause it even before that and say something else.
Okay.
Tim Riley emailed me individually.
Who's
And
Tim Riley?
Tim Riley is a user from the
Okay.
UK, and he has a house for us to use
For
for Ironman Bolton.
Oh gosh.
He said, if you guys want to do an Ironman
gosh.
race,
No,
he goes,
no.
you have a house here in the UK.
Oh,
and
no.
we'll
Housing
pay for
isn't
your
the limiting factor.
We'll pay for your flights. I'll rent you a wetsuit.
For Chad and I?
Yeah.
But you're not involved.
No, I'll do it.
Oh, okay.
If you guys do it, I'll do it. But
No.
I told him I would spring it live on the podcast on you guys. So
No.
are you ready to do Ironman Bolton?
No.
No. Yeah, that's what I thought. Sorry, Tim. I
Thank
told
for
you
the
they'd say
offer,
no.
Tim. It's very nice of you.
Very
but-
kind.
No.
But no. Chad and I are not Iron Men. That's just how it works out. So, but you two are going to get real close.
Oh, there was drinking involved. I don't know if it's going to happen.
At the Christmas party, there was
This was Booze Field.
some
Forgot about that.
some libations were
Wait,
involved.
that's how
Nate got a Stella in him, and that was that.
one beer.
So Chad and Nate are going to go after Masters.
Well, maybe. We need the bike. There's a
I
lot
It's
of
in the earliest stages of kicking it around.
I want to hold you guys to this because it'd be awesome for many reasons. Masters, it just rolls right off the tongue. Masters Tandem TT National Championships.
which is probably more competitive than we're giving it credit for.
It's probably really
We're going
competitive.
to find out. It's dangerously fast.
we were joking that it was like, so that's how you'll get your national championship bands on the jersey.
Basically,
right?
you just find the nichest of niches
Yeah.
and then go for
and then
that.
put the stripes on your sleeve and call it
Call it
a
good.
lifetime.
Yep.
But we were thinking about this. You guys could actually put out a lot of power between the two of you.
Yeah.
I would like Chad to be in front. He's more aero.
Yeah.
And then maybe I won't have to be as low, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel
so
like
I can put out more power.
I feel like, and then you'd put the thing is, I guess, I don't know if anybody can find links to like Aero TT bikes or Aero Tandem bikes, put them into the forum.
We might have access to one. This will be something where we'll write it once the day before.
Chad will crash at the turnaround for sure.
You'll be yelling at me on the race day. And the other thing is we have to find I guess reach won't really be a big deal for me because there's some of them too where I could
You're
probably
big,
ride
so
like
the positioning will be hard.
yeah, but I could even kind of ride a road
I
position
know how to fix it.
and the saddle height. I might have to do a custom like seat post or something.
We put rearward extensions behind Chad, and then you can just reach there. You can get your reach. You'll be
There's
reaching
probably
around Chad.
UCI rules.
Nice and comfy.
Yeah, but anyways, that seemed like a good idea when we were
So much
drinking.
about this I don't like.
We talked about going to nationals anyways, just for fun.
Man.
But we could try it, Chad. We should just do it every year until we win.
I think it's good that
Pictures
Chad,
on the internet.
It's good that Chad isn't in back because I could see him getting frustrated and just punching you. So keep him in front.
Just
keep
kidney
Nate
blows.
safe.
I'm gonna. So I'm so tall too. My face is probably gonna be resting on his lower back.
We saw a photo of that, and that pretty much just cinched it for me. I'm not doing
We
this.
need to build something into your kit where
It's way
like
too much touching.
I can rest my forehead on your back.
Like a fairing pad.
Yeah,
something
like exactly.
that.
So I don't have to like deal with my neck.
It's more
And I'll
loss
just-
to the pedals,
okay.
Chad.
Hope you don't have too much protein the night before. And,
Back to the question.
yeah.
All right. Mark races Vet Masters road races at a high level, finishing in top 3 most weekends. I've had about 10 to 12 wins this year. That's a good win percentage for road racing, especially at that level. And he says this year, and just needs something extra to get national championships jerseys, so I thought I'd give TrainerRoad a go. I've done the Sweet Spot Base High Volume 1 plan, and I'm planning on doing the General Build Volume, or he says that he is doing the General Build Mid-Volume plan now. My question is, would it be okay to do 2 general build plans back-to-back, then go into the specialty phase? I'm looking to peak for the beginning of May for a 3-day race. I've come close to winning 3 times, but missed out by seconds or a puncture. Oh, that'd be the worst. It says, love the training plans. Thanks, Mark. So really his question is doing back-to-back build phases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in most cases, I would think of a couple better ways to go, what I would consider to be better ways. In your case, being a longtime racer, you know yourself well, you're fast, you can probably, it sounds like you can handle a lot of volume. I think this might actually be a workable idea because basically you're talking about doing a base phase and then doing a 16-week build phase,
Yeah.
which
tough.
doesn't have to be 3 on 1 off. It could be 2 on 1 off. And you're a master's rider. I would recommend that. I mean, you're a master's rider. You could be 30 years old. You could be 60 years old. I don't know. If you're toward the latter or the older end of that, I would absolutely recommend 2 on 1 off. If you're younger, maybe the 3 on 1 off works well. But 16 weeks of building could actually work for an athlete who's this experienced and can tolerate this much volume. So I think it's not a bad idea. And obviously you're going to reassess 3 times over the course of that. So you're going to keep on inching it up. And I'd be willing to bet if you've made it this far in your career and you're still getting results like these, that you recognize danger signs. And you're probably pretty good at backing down the training when it's necessary.
Yeah, so the danger signs, I see they could be very much evident in this. Like this is a common, or there are a lot of pitfalls with this one, basically. Just because basically when you're in a build phase, it's a substantial amount of work. It's pretty tough. And when you're building for 3
Build's
on, 1 off.
Arguably the toughest part. I mean, it's almost always the highest volume. So it's the most training volume, the most training stress you're going to dump on yourself. I mean, once you get into specialty, it gets a little more specific and tones down a bit in terms of overall weekly stress.
Yeah.
And then, of course, base is just the most friendliest of the versions because we're preparing the motor.
And I see people, if they more commonly, because Mark is far above average in this respect. If he's finishing, very far above average in terms of his physiological capabilities here. But more commonly, you'll see if a person does this sort of thing, it'll get very hard to be able to continue to absorb those adaptations.
It's a long time to load.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
you'd have to be careful with it. But again, I'm guessing he has enough experience to recognize when that loading isn't paying off.
On the flip side of that, just in the forum last night, I answered a question, forum at TrainerRoad.com. Someone said, I'm training for Leadville and I'm super tired. And what they're doing, Leadville's 8.5 months away, and they're on sustained power build right now.
Whoa, yeah,
and they're getting tired right now.
Yeah.
I think they had so much time that they were going to go sweet spot, build, and then restart it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say though, I mean, sustained power build 2 is it's a hard plan. So either go to a lower volume, or I said drop back down a sweet spot. There's no if you're getting tired this early, and I've done this before for an Ironman.
Yeah.
8 months out, it's so hard.
Oh,
you should be chomping at the bit right now.
Yeah.
For 8 months.
I might bench an athlete if him or her is that he or she is that far out and already fatigued.
So
I said take a recovery week right away.
Yeah.
But you might even go as farther than just take a week off completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably. And then a week of recovery and then maybe get back into it
Yeah.
and recognize that you're firing on all cylinders at that point.
Yeah.
More commonly, if you have extra time to be able to repeat something like this, we'd usually recommend repeating sweet spot base or the base phase or like the second half of sweet spot base, sweet spot base 2. That would be something. And in this case, Mark, it seems like you skipped the second part of sweet spot base.
Extending base is typically more tolerable. I mean,
Yes.
It's just lower on the intensity, lower on the volume. Either way, the lower on the training load. Let's put it in those terms.
It's still hard.
But it is. Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
trying to make it sound like it's easy. This is all I'm speaking relatively. So, but extending base versus extending build, I would almost always veer towards base. If we're a newer athlete, an athlete who's new to structured training, new to power-based training, an athlete who hasn't been competing and winning at a high level, I would absolutely steer him back toward base.
Yeah, agreed. That's the much more common approach. If you're looking to double up phase because you have extra time, common questions. We get a lot about this sort of stuff. If you're looking to double up, we recommend in most cases that you double up or extend the base phase somehow and then kind of build into things. That's usually the safest approach. You're still going to get more fitness out of this. That's a good thing. The one that I personally find the toughest to extend is the build phase. On the specialty phase, you'll be surprised at how much you can kind of extend things for, maybe even up to 4 weeks. Who knows? Maybe something a little more even, depending. Maybe a little less. But just by repeating that final week, that's not quite as intense and making sure that you're not overworking yourself. So when you're talking about extending the plan because you have extra time, those are all different ones. Let's go into Marius's question. So he says, my smart indoor trainer just broke and it costs about the same to fix it as it does to buy a new one. He says, I currently have dual-sided Garmin Vector 3s on my road bike, which are supposed to have an accuracy of plus or minus 1% and a ton of extra data. When getting a new indoor trainer, do I need to get one with a similar accuracy like the Tax Neo, or can a less accurate and cheaper smart trainer do the job when considering that all the important metrics like pedal smoothness, etc., can be provided by the Vectors? This is a good question.
Yeah, this is a good question for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so a few things here. One, I just don't ever expect your power meter to match your trainer.
Yeah, they won't.
You kind of got to pick one, and we always suggest to pick your power meter. Yep.
Because you use it inside and outside, right?
Exactly. So you want it to be consistent through. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, I think that they're more accurate than trainers. Yeah. Some companies say they have plus or minus 1. But if they're all true, like how can they all be so far apart? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
Someone's not right here.
Yeah.
And also, though, it also depends on where you measure, because you're measuring at the pedal, right? You have much less loss than by the time it goes to your drivetrain to the trainer.
Yeah.
So that's also a difference there that could happen. So even if they're both within 1%, but your drivetrain isn't perfectly efficient, there's gonna be a gap between those two.
And can we cover really quick a little bit about how, so like a power meter will measure strain or measure power with strain gauges, so they're measuring force, and then accelerometers usually to measure velocity, and then they have this
rotation. Yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. So those two things put together, that's how you get power. But smart trainers in most cases do not have. I actually don't even know if there is one with strain gauges.
No, some say they have them. But then I always question, and then why are you having me do a spin down?
Yeah.
Which I don't. I've asked them. They've never told me like why. But there's probably a good reason, and I just don't understand it. So let's give them benefit of the doubt.
Sure.
Right. But I'm going to cover this. If they don't have strain gauges, how it would be measured is really they're measuring with speed, and then they might have like fluctuations in speed where they try to counter in for that. But that's really, how they can get through to these things.
So something on those, like I'll use the Kurt Kinetic, the little pod there.
In-ride.
Yeah, the in-ride. And what they do is by doing a spin down, they measure the efficiency of the system between the pressure of the tire and like the tire pressure and all that kind of stuff.
Pressure
rolling
of the roller
resistance.
against the
Yeah,
tire.
exactly. You get the resistance there, and then they have math in there to try to say if you accelerate this 10, I forgot the flywheel, I forgot how heavy it is, and you go from this speed to this speed, well, that's going to take this many watts.
Right.
And for other trainers, what you will see, and you see this all the time on people on with a power meter and an erg trainer, is they don't always, the trainer smooths it out. So you might accelerate, and your power meter will say, you just did 1,000 watts. But your trainer says you just did 600 watts. And I don't know, I'm going to say the power meter is right in that situation.
Yeah.
What will also happen is erg then thinks you're less, because the trainer's measuring 6, but you're actually doing 1,000.
Yeah.
And then it goes back down. Is you'll see people, and this especially happens if you start in a really low cadence and then you kind of kick it up the beginning of an interval. Is your power meter kind of gets ahead of erg mode, and then it slowly fades back into it because the trainer isn't reading that spike that you did.
Right.
And we see that a lot. So to kind of counteract that is, don't do that kick up like right before the interval.
It's for that very reason that a lot of the workout techs will say, set your cadence in the 10 or 20 seconds preceding each of these whatever interval.
Ideally for the trainer, it would be if you could maintain the exact same cadence and pedal stroke, because even just the different ways that you pedal can also affect erg.
Yeah. And something to say too along these lines is, I know that this may create some like dissonance in people's minds, like, but wait a second, it's graphing my power. And the power reported by smart trainers in most cases is very, very smooth. Yeah. It's artificially smooth. Like it's too smooth. But if you think about it, like you buy a smart trainer to hold you to a target, right? So like if you saw your actual power output and it was still going like this, because that is what in reality happens, you kind of be like, hey, what's going on? It's not holding me to it. So it's kind of tricky.
I think I can say this. There was an unnamed trainer company, and I don't think they released this firmware, but they sent it to us, and whatever we told the trainer to set it at, it would automatically output that same power. Just perfectly. Yeah. So it didn't matter what you powered at. Yeah. But if you set it 300 watts, it suddenly said you were doing 300 watts. Yeah. We were like, what? Even if you were doing 200 watts or 400 watts.
I'm perfect.
Yeah, it messes with people's brains, because they get a power meter and they see the power they're actually doing, and they immediately think that like there's a bug in TrainerRoad, like we're not setting you correctly, when really it's like you said, it's the artificial smoothing of the trainer, which can be good. I kind of want to do, I'm not going to do this, but an experiment where some people, I just tell them what they want to hear, like this is what your power is, and they'll think that TrainerRoad there is better. And then other people see what their power really is, and I think too, when you see what your power really is, and if it's sitting above your target at all, it automatically becomes harder mentally.
Yes.
Where if your power is at the same level, but it appears to be correct, it's not as hard.
I don't, and this is an unnamed company, and I don't even know if this actually ended up happening, but I believe that one of them pushed a firmware update where they're like, hey, sorry, we're not going to smooth this anymore. And,
well received.
there were pitchforks involved. Not really, but like people very upset. So it ended up reverting back to the smooth. Yep. So it's definitely, for these two things not to line up, it's not abnormal. It's normal.
Yeah. So what we do, we have a feature called Power Match, and what that does is it tries to figure out the difference between your power meter and the trainer. So really the power meter is driving the offset for the erg trainer. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in that. We actually do some very simple but machine learning to try to figure out what's going on. It's not perfect. It can be improved, but it's way better than always having a 20-watt offset. And and the problem too is the slopes aren't the same between the power meters and the trainers. So you might be perfectly in line at 20 or 200 watts, but at 300 watts, there could be a 30 off 20, say, and then at 400 watts, there's a 40 offset.
And then at 10 watt or at 50 watts, it might be very different too.
Exactly. So it's just, that can be frustrating. So all of these things, we're constantly trying to update it so that it's better and better and better. We have a feature that says like, lie to me. And we just say you're doing what the target is.
Lie to me checkbox.
Just lie to me. Yeah. That would be funny.
Speaking of new features.
We should. Or do you have something else to add on to it?
One other thing. No, that's it.
That's it?
That's it.
Cool. So 2 things that I want to mention that we've pushed into whether it's the website or the app for TrainerRoad. So if you're listening to the podcast and you don't know what we're all about here, you can go to trainerroad.com and check it out. But we now have like updated onboarding. So then when you sign, and basically it's like a marketing term, but basically what that means is that when you sign up and start using TrainerRoad, it's going to be it's going to be a really cool experience. Like we've basically tried to, it's an intro workout. There's like the whole thing.
It's mobile only right now though.
Right. So not on desktop yet. But basically, if you're the type of person that's using TrainerRoad right now and you recommend it to people, it's like a handhold experience. That's gonna
we've improved it.
It's awesome. You'll dig it. Then on top of that, with the calendar, so on the website side of things, you can now schedule recurring workouts. So for you, Nate, I see on your calendar all the time push and pull, like you just talked about, your weight training days that you have, and they're usually on the same day, that sort of thing. Now you can create an activity, and it can either be a TrainerRoad workout. So like, let's say you're just kind of ad-libbing and doing whatever workouts you're doing, but you know that you want to take the ramp test every 4 to 6 weeks because that's what's recommended. If you do that, you can actually schedule the ramp test as a recurring workout. So every 4 weeks, or decide whatever it is, it'll sit there on your calendar. Or if you have something like a non-cycling workout or a group ride or anything else like that, you can schedule that in. And it's really cool because you can set an expiration date for that repeating pattern. Or you can set it so that it goes on forever. It's pretty sweet.
You can even do some crazy stuff where you can say, I want this to be every 4 days, only for 4 weeks, or every Tuesday, Thursday for 4 weeks. But you can build these kind of like little small micro plans where if you want to go like, I want to do the same workout and then 2 aerobic ones, and that's going to be every, let's say you could do like a two days on, 1 day off, but that will be a repeating pattern that doesn't line up exactly with the weeks. What I'm trying to say is you don't have to line it up exactly with the weeks.
Yeah, it's cool.
And then you could do
Very
that for
flexible.
4 weeks and then retest and try something else. And it's you can do whatever you want. So
it's a neat feature.
Yep.
We're always testing and building different things and adding things in. So some exciting stuff coming down the pipe soon. So let's end with Scott's question, shall we? He says, in a recent podcast, Coach Chad briefly mentioned the German 4,000-meter Olympic track team and their training intensity regimen. Out of interest, I found a research paper which analyzed that world record-setting team. And we'll put this link into the forum.trainerroad.com so you guys can check this out. He says, what I found most interesting was that the 2 fastest riders, and they did 4K at 4:18 and 4:19, that's so fast, had distinctly different physiologies and power profiles. One had high aerobic capacity and relatively low anaerobic mobilization, while the other had high anaerobic mobilization and relatively low aerobic capacity. He says, and it bears mentioning, it's still Olympic level, so it's low only in comparison to each other. Yeah. So my question is, how can power derived from 2 different energy systems result in equally fast times at the same discipline? And how does this relate to how fast the average TrainerRoad user is based solely on FTP data? Thanks for the TrainerRoad crew for putting out a great product.
Well, this is like kind of around the cutoff point of 4 minutes, right? Where I think if it was longer, if it was a 10 or 20 minute event, the aerobic person would win. And if it was shorter, 2 minutes, the anaerobic person would totally win.
Those metabolic predispositions would start to hold stronger sway for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of the cool thing about these short races, though. Like you do a track event that sits around this, it's kind of cool.
That's the beauty of it. I mean,
Levels the
athletes of all different metabolic backgrounds can actually excel and work well together, as in the case of a pursuit. I mean, very different athletes, relatively, and they set a world record. So it's pretty interesting. But this right here is kind of like coaches and coaching services will always have jobs. It's complex.
That's it.
You can take 30 different riders and they will have 30 different metabolic profiles. It's just how it is. Some subtly different, some vastly different. There are many components, but 5 of them. Just think in terms of VO2 max and your VLA max, which is basically aerobic capacity and your anaerobic capacity. You can keep it super simple. And then on top of that, we have FTP, we have fat max, where we're optimizing our fat burning. We have carb max, how many grams of carbohydrate can you actually metabolize in an hour? Finding us right around 90. And then economy ties to both those, of course. How much fuel goes into the tank, how much mileage comes out, how much energy comes out. So per rider or between riders, you can't really tell how much of the FTP is derived from aerobic versus anaerobic. You can, however, test for that stuff, or you can simply go do events and see where you excel and where you don't, and decide if the events that you don't excel are ones you want to excel, tweak your training accordingly. I mean, I won't say it's not rocket science. It's still pretty complex, but it's also pretty simple.
This kind of goes back to the goals and strengths and weaknesses, where I think I have a high. I didn't need
You saw it?
$1,000 a month coach. I said, you know what, I can do really high power for a minute, and I think I can do well in a race if tactically. So I'm going to train that.
Sure. Yeah. So you go after that and see if it works. Maybe it does. Trial and error process. And maybe it does work, but you don't really like racing that way. You'd rather save it for a sprint, or you'd
might
rather
be more fun
vary
doing it.
things.
Or you have different goals. You're trying to do Leadville.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do a minute sprints. And 2, it's like I harp on this point a lot, but there might be something. Like 1, if you do a power profile, whatever you've trained for is usually what the power profile shows. Right? And then,
so it's not necessarily a strength. It's just what you're good at right now because that's what you've been targeting.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, I mean, okay, great. You show me, it's like a rearview mirror, right? 2, your goals might not match up what's like what you want to do and what's fun for you might not match up what's good or what you're naturally good at. Yeah.
Totally.
It's cool if they do match up, but I tend to think that most people know if they're good at short, hard stuff or if they're good at these long events.
Totally.
Like in your first year of cycling, you just figure it out. It doesn't require a sports university lab.
Now, plenty of riders will bang their heads against the wall for a long period of time trying to do events that they're not really suited to, thinking that I will get better, and they probably do, but maybe not giving due credit to the fact that there might be events that they are better suited to. And then when your eyes are open to those events and you see, oh, wow, I'm actually really good at this, and you start pursuing it, it can be pretty motivating for sure. But the point is, there are these certain characteristics, and another point is, there are these certain characteristics, but they're not etched in stone. I mean, to varying extents, you can change so many of those things. You can improve VLA max, you can improve VO2 max, you can improve your FTP, your fat max. All those things can be swayed. Dietary means, training, etc.
But put yourself in a box.
You don't. I mean, if there is something and you really want it badly, you can figure out how to at least get better at it. Maybe you'll never be the best at it, but you can get better. Maybe you will be the best. I don't know.
The interesting point to me is that you have two totally different physiologies, but the outcome is similar.
Or 2 different training types.
Exactly right.
Like, like one person specialized in anaerobic and one person specialized in aerobic.
And that's it too. So this coach recognized the difference between these 2 riders, trained them probably vastly differently, and they came together when necessary and put together a world record performance.
Yeah, like there are so many different ways where there are a lot of weeds to get lost in, right? Like you can really go deep into this stuff, but like there's, in my mind, the majority of us listening, I'll just speak for myself. I don't want to be presumptuous for anybody else here, but I feel like there's so much room for me to max out my potential that like I kind of like Chad, I know you've said this here, like save the granular analysis for later, right? Like I have a lot of low-hanging fruit.
Well, and that's it too. Until you've exploited that, until you've done the easy gets, the most obvious ones, there's so much room for improvement for just about all of us there that when you start getting in the weeds on these little tiny intricacies, it's not the right direction to go.
I'm just going to disagree a little bit the coach thing, because with this, what we talked about before, I know I'm good at these short aerobic things or anaerobic things, so maybe I should do short power build. like it's as simple as that.
Yeah,
I don't.
You don't need.
It's not even. That's not even like fine.
You don't have to get into the data.
No,
for
that's
that.
not the granular stuff.
That's not granular
about.
stuff.
I'm talking
though,
about
but-
trying to shift VO2 max and anaerobic capacity because the two they're counterbalanced. One goes up, the other goes down. I mean that's
Right.
basically how it works. You don't have to get that in depth.
Totally.
So early in your cycling career, or
Nate
I
just
do
looked at
short
how he
power build.
races.
Yeah, and I do short power build, and then I'll do the crit plan.
a
And
lot
that's
of it
how
is
it
should be.
very straightforward.
Yeah,
yes.
and I would like, I wouldn't do if I'm going to do these 1 minute attacks, sustain power build and then century plan.
Yeah.
Right, like
Right.
like that would not be smart. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just think it doesn't take to be like your level of experience, Chad, to know to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe
Sure.
to build a plan, yes, but
Yeah,
to
yeah,
know
to
which
build
plan
the plan,
yeah,
sure,
to know
right.
like
But
I
to
should
know
do
which one
short
you should
stuff.
pick. Yeah. Most common question we get it though is which training plan should I pick? One of the most common ones, right? And hopefully with time, we're making that more and more clear and easy. And like Nate said, look at the demands of your racing, pair it up. There you go. It's a good match. With that covers the questions that we're going to cover here on this episode of the podcast. If you're with us live, that's on YouTube or Facebook, usually every Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific. You can join us on Facebook and YouTube, and you can ask questions, and then we answer those. And some people say, why don't you include them in the podcast? Well, it's because we want you to join us live. It's fun when you can see us and join us that way and have some live interaction. If you can't catch it live, you can always just go onto YouTube or Facebook and watch it thereafter, after the fact too, and you'll get to see those questions. So you can catch it that way as well. We appreciate you guys sending everything in. Remember, submit those questions at trainerroad.com/podcast. We will be back next week, even though it's the holiday week. Because we care about this thing. We want to do it.
And if I can jump in there, I did promise to cover the second half of the VO2 max spiel that I started last week. We didn't get to it. We will get to it next week, I promise.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to have an interesting question for next week. It's going to provide for a lot of banter in the forum too, I'm sure. So join us next week. That'll be Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific. Happy holidays. Enjoy the time that you get to spend there. And hopefully you're going to get some training time in as well. If you're with us on the live stream, stick with us. Chat soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Jeff says, I think Tandem TT was dropped from 2018 Masters Nats. Not sure if we'll be back.
Yeah.
That'll be even better because
It was.
maybe we'll be the only people that show up. Like people don't realize we're the only people with the tandem bike.
They'll just bring a jersey out for you.
Yep, there you guys
right
go.
there.
Just go do like a 2-hour 40K TT.
Oh, man, that's funny.
2 hours. Yeah, we don't have to we just eat a sandwich. It'd be like Chad and I riding in the countryside
Get to the-
together,
ride
take
a
a
beach
picnic.
cruiser.
Get to the turnaround, unclip,
Yeah.
turn the bike around,
Two
hop back
birds
on.
suddenly
The turnaround's got me
appear.
worried,
I
man.
just thought about that. I hadn't thought the turnaround, like, that would be seriously scary.
Oh yeah, I'm unclipping. That's why.
Drag a foot like a mountain biker, like
Yeah.
like a downhill racer. Put your foot out.
No, it'll be scary, especially with me because I weight the bike at a high point, at a high pivot point.
Yeah, they've got to have you doing.
You'd have to practice that.
It would
a
have to
lot.
be like a widening. If it's a 2-lane road, it's got to be wider than that. I would think. Like at some point, you're gonna have to have like a wide area. To
I don't
turn
think
around.
so. I think the turnaround is the turnaround.
If
In
it's
years
not-
past, when they've had tandem
They didn't have a wide
categories, I don't think they changed anything.
If it's
You
not
just have to know how
flat,
to do
It's
it.
pretty sketchy.
I'm not doing it because I don't. If it's like a downhill, I don't want to go like 65 miles per hour
you'll
with
go
you.
fast.
I don't want to die.
Yeah.
We would hit
Neither do I.
crazy speeds.
I don't want to
Just
die.
crazy.
That's enough weight to make us
So
go real
if it's
fast.
only perfectly flat,
Let's see. Okay. Somebody, and we kind of covered this, but maybe we can go into a little bit more detail here. But he says, for strength training, how do you assess the multi-day soreness post-gym session, and how do you correlate TSS from a big gym day? So number one, not all TSS is created equal, even on the bike, right? Like, so let alone, stress coming from other activities.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Still
even-
stress though.
I wouldn't even bother associating a TSS value with it. Just know that today I lifted easy, today I lifted moderate, today I lifted hard. Just some subjective metrics to keep track of, what sort of strength training you did, how it impacted your bike training. But trying to assign a specific TSS value to it, I don't know anything that would do it. I don't even know what you would base that on. I mean, it can't be pounds moved. It would have to be relative to something. It's you can't tie it to heart rate. You can't tie it to power output. It's not going to happen. So you would have to find a different way to quantify that stress. It could be a 1 to 10 scale or something, but it wouldn't lump in with your TSS. You would just have to see how the two interacted.
Rhett asks, and Chad, you would be able to speak on this quite well, thoughts about using CrossFit to complement a training program on the bike?
That's a tough one. CrossFit is highly metabolic, and they do some what I basically equate to VO2 max training, but they're doing whole body VO2 max training, whereas on the bike we're doing basically leg driven VO2 max training. So there might be a little bit of carryover, but I don't think it's ever going to make you a faster cyclist.
I feel like it's hard to do both at the same time.
It's really hard to do both. They pull on the same systems and they pull hard, both of them.
It's the recovery aspect
yeah.
that doing CrossFit.
I wouldn't use it to supplement cycling. I would just do it because it's
fun.
It's so fun.
It is fun.
And brutally hard.
Yeah.
And two, if you're a new person and you've never done VO2 max work, you can improve your cycling doing some CrossFit. Like
Totally.
you do like a HIIT workout.
No, that's always something to consider. If you're a pretty deconditioned athlete, any form of exercise stress is probably going to make you a little better at just about everything in that similar realm.
But if you're a 3 watt and above, even probably 2.5 and above, or just you've been training for a while and you've been doing it in the cycling, it's super hard.
It'd be tough to balance that.
It's I've seen athletes try to do it. I've never seen anyone do it well.
I've not seen a single athlete pull
It's
it
like
off.
they do it for like 6 weeks, maybe 9 weeks, and then they destroy. They get blown up or injured.
I'm looking forward to the CrossFit Games crit again. That was awesome. There are some seriously good cyclists.
Some
I
fun
know.
stuff.
You never know too. Like it's hard to tell the speed and the power watching on
That was
TV.
relative speed. That was speed with some very bulky athletes moving around a pretty basic course.
But
so you put those guys against a Cat 3 racer, and he or she
I want
would
to see a
blow their doors off.
135-pound good crit racer in there.
The woman that won
lap the field.
That's what I want to see it.
The woman that won, like I had her picked out so early on in the race. I was like, oh, she knows what she's doing. She's a shark in the water.
She just hid the whole time, and she knew that she had many events to come.
Yeah.
So she didn't spend it on something that wouldn't have paid off. So she just waited for the final sprint. She's a smart racer. She might have actually been pretty fast.
Yeah. Sean says, can you talk about how strength training can influence basal metabolic rates to assist in weight loss goals during the winter?
Yeah, it's more active tissue, so it will nudge up your basal metabolic rate, but how much, and will that impact weight loss? The real benefit, or one of the benefits of strength training, is that it boosts your excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, your EPOC, so you're actually operating at a higher level, which is another influence on basal metabolic rate. But
I feel like
there's some benefit to it, some uptick.
When you add in strength training, I feel like you should be adding in additional fueling as well. So like, I don't know if the perspective, because I've heard people share this perspective, like I'll put on more muscle mass, increase my basal metabolic rate, and then therefore I'll just keep eting the same, and then I'll just burn more.
There's still an energy balance, and if you're doing more work, you're going to have to fuel more.
You have to
or
fuel more.
You can lose weight to a point, but to a point.
Yeah, so it's kind of tricky.
The rule of thumb is for every pound of muscle, it's 50 more calories a day for your basal metabolic rate.
Yeah, so it's not
50 is pretty easy to take in.
It's not a big win, but a pound of muscle is.
No, but it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you get 250 calories.
Oh
That's much better.
Yeah, if you can add 5 pounds to your frame, but does that 5 pounds make you a faster bike racer? You got to ask yourself that too. So
and think about it, like a small Cliff Bar is like 250 calories, right? Like it's easy to put that back.
But hopefully too, you're if you can do a shift between fat and muscle, then you're really golden. And I think almost all of us have fat to lose.
Yeah,
for sure.
For
most cyclists could use another pound or two of muscle.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Evenly distributed.
You're talking about me?
Especially when you...
Specifically.
when you watch the Tour de France, I'd say that's the case.
Seriously.
That's a different level, though, too.
On those guys.
Oh, totally. Those guys...
I think they're so well-trained.
Can't really include them in this conversation.
I never see people in the break, or hardly ever people in the breakaway. They are parallel, arms bent, like, in the TT position, draped for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Right?
They're strong.
And they don't look like they're like suddenly like, oh my gosh, I can't hold this. It's not a limiter for them.
But I'd be willing to bet a lot of those guys do isometric, core type work.
Totally.
I'm probably all of them.
The other thing too that I've not done enough, and I'm trying to do more, is just riding in the drops more inside.
Yeah,
totally.
Because
inside doesn't get much more specific than that.
I know, like exactly. So inside, I always am on the hoods because it's just easier. And then outside, I think I can suddenly be in the drops for an hour and be okay.
So going into the TT challenge, or the weeks leading into it, we Emmett and I finished our workouts with the plank. Most times, I would do it with my arms together. So in a TT position, that's how I would plank. For that very reason, I have to hold this position. I'm going to train.
That was
this position.
That's a little thing he's never told us. That was a little edge that
little secrets I
had
to myself.
He came out swinging, man. He did well. He did well. Swinging for what you're down on one limb, but you're still swinging.
Yeah, exactly.
Still swinging.
One arm swinging.
Okay, somebody says, Chad, break down the pistol squat, please. I find that I can do them, and the only thing difficult is the flexibility required at the bottom of the movement.
That's the first thing I was going to say. You have to have the flexibility to do pistols. Everyone thinks I got to have the strength to do pistols. No. You have to have the flexibility to do it. And I practice that. So I do a dynamic a dynamic warm up before every workout. Leg swings and specific movements that aren't static holds, not stretching exactly. I'm moving through ranges of motion that I'm about to imply, doing it at velocities that do apply. And with the pistols, I'll get down in a position where I basically sit on my low legs, so squat down real low, and then I just put one leg out in front of me, and that's the base of the pistol. If you can't get into that position with a flat foot, then you're going to need some sort of aid. Yeah. You're either not going to go down as low, or you're going to have to elevate your heel. You maybe going to have to hold that front leg. Well, that wouldn't even be a flexibility issue. That's the dangling leg issue, which is another issue. You can't do pistols on the floor without your leg hitting the ground. Then you need to do them on a bench so that leg can actually drape a little lower than what would be the plane of the ground.
Yeah.
So there are little modifications, but primarily you have to have the flexibility to get down there, and you have to have the leg strength to support the floating leg. If you don't have those two things, you're going to have to modify the pistol.
Yes.
Can I trigger Chad?
And you got to have a lot of strength.
Something to add to this really quick, sorry, before you trigger Chad, is when I was going up and getting everything evaluated and everything else with at Rebound Physical Therapy in Bend, when I went up there, when I was doing that very thing, and I had been working on pistols for I didn't even know how long, and they were always hard on the left side, and I actually could not get into that position because I had an impingement in my hip that's making it so that basically I could not stay stable in that position. Yeah. It wasn't possible.
Yeah. And that's why I like the unilateral exercises, so you can see those imbalances. You can actually see
super important
that there's something that isn't balanced on one side with the other side of the body. Will that have an influence on my performance, on my posture, on injury?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Likelihood.
Robert, I'm sorry. This question's from Robert. I'm adding leg press 4x6 sets max weight before my TR triathlon long distance low volume. Is this good? I am finding getting improvement in my 1 to 30 second power numbers.
Leg press isn't a bad machine. It's just it's a limited machine. So, but there's nothing wrong with deriving or building strength. I mean, a leg press, we're on a fixed position on a bike, so it's not that much different with the leg press. You don't have to do all of these things without the benefit of any sort of support. There is a place for that. I just don't want people to peak at a leg press. Honestly, if I had my way, everyone would only do single leg presses anyway. Just get on a leg press machine, bang out a hard set of whatever single leg. Try to make it velocity specific over time. Yeah. And it's not a bad machine. It's not a bad way to go. Machines have their place. I just don't want that to be the be all end all.
Yeah. I think that's a good point.
What about for the triathlon long distance? Like, does it have any bearing to the fact that he's going to be doing an Ironman race? Like,
in the benefits?
In terms of strength, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's more leg strength. It's more fiber recruitment. It's a movement pattern that's real similar to what he's going to be doing on the bike and sort of similar to what he'll be doing on the run. So I think especially in the preseason, early season, why not?
And then the last thing, Robert, you say you're finding improvement in your 1 to 30 second power numbers, although that might be nice. Probably not your goal as a long distance triathlete.
Yeah,
it's a good point.
So basically, you're maybe incurring a bit of anaerobic adaptation that's not exactly desirable as a long course athlete.
Right.
So you want the lowest VLA max you can get as a ultra endurance athlete.
Yeah.
And this may not lean that direction, but it's also, I'm guessing you're a ways out from your event. Does he say he's in base training?
I don't know.
Anyway,
I think so, because it's before I start my plan. So
yeah. So you can get away with a whole lot before you've even begun.
Yeah.
But as you get closer to your event and stuff like that, it's probably going to take a greater toll than you can abide.
People are very interested in your Tandem TT nets, and they want to know, Chad, when the Tandem TT specialty plan is going to come out.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Well, can we do them all together? Chad and I do each workout together on the Tandem.
He will kill you.
That's my one requisite, is that we don't never do a single workout together.
I'm going to be behind him, and I'll just encourage him the whole time. Go, keep it up, Chad. Buddy. You're beating me. You're in the lead.
Chad will kill you. Oh man, that would not be good for TrainerRoad.
I'm liking this idea less and less.
All right, that's what I've got this week here.
Cool.
I don't know if you have anything else. Cool. thanks for joining us, everybody, on the live stream. We love having you guys here. You can share out that live stream as well. We'd appreciate that. Always growing the podcast. That's the goal. I guess that's basically it. We will be on that normal schedule next week, so we'll see you then. Hopefully you get in plenty of time training as well as plenty of time gorging yourself on treats. Got to keep that balance going.
Happy holidays.
That's it. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Bye-bye.